It amazed me that even though we'd been dating for about 8 months, he was still able to make me go weak in the knees. I idly pulled the blanket around me and sat on the bench. I sat all the way to the back so I could lean against the backrest and found my feet swinging freely. It was one of the problems with being so short. We ate our food and talked about general stuff and ideas. We meandered along in conversation, talking about things we had planned for the coming week, our friends, and the Christmas shopping we still needed to do. But that also evolved into conversations about the likelihood of aliens and the audacity of squirrels existing to cause utter mayhem. We actively avoided serious topics tonight because we talked about those during regular dinners and time spent together. Tonight we needed light and fun. I pretended the icy wind zipping around us, like it was playing tag with itself, didn't bother me, even though my toes were frozen and so was my nose. I wasn't going to skip making those angels. They were going to look so good. I turned to Liam as he finished off the hot chocolate Jade had packed for us in one of her huge thermoses. Are you ready to make a lasting snow angel? I asked. Yep, he said, grinning. Let's do this. Yes! We got up from our seats on the bench. I left the blanket there so it could keep us warm on the way home. I carefully walked into an open area, making sure not to let our footprints mess up the snow too much. Here, Liam asked me a couple of paces away. I nodded. Then we turned around in the last pair of footprints we'd made and fell to the ground into the snow, carefully. We did not free fall into 6 inches of snow. That would have only caused injuries. And go, I said, moving my legs and arms open and shut and up and down. The cold seeped into my the sweatshirt I'd borrowed and my dress, all the way down to my foundation garments. It was freezing, but in a good way. There was a giddiness running through me that I hadn't felt in several years, not since Dad passed. I couldn't help but giggle, like a little kid while we did it. And stop, Liam said after a minute. I sat up and carefully moved my feet inside the angel before standing up. Liam did the same, and we both leapt out of our angels and landed by the snow we had already marred walking to our spots. Liam landed on his feet. I naturally did not. And that is the end of chapter 2.
Hey.
Yeah.
I think it's going to take you off solo there. There you go. All right. Good job. We did get a couple readers pop in. So let's see. Some comments that came up with your story are, let me see if I can get up here. One, somebody liked the friendship between them.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Where is it? Shayne McCoy. Yeah, she liked their friend. She thought the friendship was so cute. So I think she was listening to the first chapter or whatever. So where can people buy this book, Am?
So these books are available on every retailer, including you can request them from your library.
Okay.
I loved libraries growing up, so I make sure that my books are there
as
well.
Ditto.
And then you can also get them. You can get the first book in the series on my PayHip site, which I'll put in the comments for people.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's free there.
Very good. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Yay.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so you feel free to stick around, or if you need to take off, I understand because it's Christmas Eve. So our next reader is going to be Amanda, and she's going to be reading 2 stories. She's going to be reading a chapter from, well, Amanda, why don't you go ahead and take it away?
Hi, everybody. I'm Noonie. I'm so glad to be here. Chrissy, thank you so much for hosting us tonight for Book Flood. This is super exciting. And Ember, I loved your story. That was awesome. I loved some of your verbal pictures and boobs freezing off and like the idea that you kept falling down or that the character kept falling down and he's like, oh, I'm so suave. It was very cute. So thank you so much for reading that. I wanted to just celebrate that this is a place where we get to celebrate stories, explore new worlds, and share the magic of words together. So I have 2 things for you tonight. And my first one excuse me, I'm thrilled to share a glimpse into As the Crow Flies. And it's the first book in our new series, which is called The Foundlings. And it's coming out in March of 2026. It's an urban fantasy set in an academy where crow and raven shifters wrestle with secrets, power, and love. At its heart, it's a male-male romance that blends magic with vulnerability. And this little excerpt gives you a taste of the world that our main character, Caden, is stepping into. So give me just a second to pull it up and we will get going. And this is from chapter 4, which is called Jimmy. Caden didn't know where to put his hands or whether to sit or stand. His stomach in knots, he perched on the edge of the sofa and stared at the door. Caden, relax, man. It's going to be fine. Lyster sat down next to him and stroked his back. You're really that keyed up? The last time I got involved with bird shifters, it ended badly, Caden snapped. What makes you think I'm excited to meet some raven shifter dude? Before Lyster could reply, someone knocked on the door. Lyster rose and got it, then froze in place. He trailed off. Caden? Margaret's voice was loud enough to be heard in the next building. Yeah, Ma, I'm here. Caden stood so she could see him. Come on in. Margaret gazed up at Lyster without moving. You must be Lyster. You're kind of cute for a crow shifter and an asshole. She breezed past him. Caden wanted to laugh at the look on Lyster's face. I thought you were helping pack up to go back on the road, Ma. I had a vision and decided to come. Margaret shrugged. We'll be back in Oregon soon enough, and then on to Arizona in time for muster. Don't you worry. Your sister at work? Her summer internship is winding down since classes are starting again. She's meeting with 2 of her friends that are already graduated and now planning to move out of the state. He headed over to the coffee maker. You want some coffee? Does the Pope shit in the woods? She retorted, still studying Lyster. You can call me Margaret. She came over and sat down at the table. Lyster seemed flummoxed, which amused Caden to no end. She's not going to bite you, Lyster. Sit down. Before he could, someone knocked at the door a second time. Lyster got it open and Caden turned. Hello, boy. Good to see you. Good to see you. Lyster answered, but Caden didn't hear what he said. A man with wiry muscles stepped in. Long black hair streaked with gray was pulled into a ponytail. He peered around and then saw Caden and grew still, staring at him. His eyes were really big, too. Big, brown, and awkward much? Caden flushed and looked away. Tingles went up and down his back and into his hair. Margaret, for her part, studied the guy like she wanted to paint him. She sat back like she was relaxed on the banquette bench, but Caden knew she was anything but that. Something, maybe an errant breeze or her own abilities, made her glance at Caden, and they stared at each other. After a moment, she motioned at the man with her chin as if to say, talk to him. Caden didn't really want to do that, but he turned back and faced the guy. I'm Caden. I'm Jimmy. He still stared at Caden, his eyes bright. They had a pull to them that made Caden want to meet his gaze, but Caden looked away like it was a physical weight. He sat down next to Margaret and folded his arms to hide his shaking hands. So, boy, you go by Caden now, huh? That's not your birth name, though, is it? From Margaret. Caden wanted to get up, make lunch that they'd just eaten, do anything but sit there at the table and get interrogated by some weird dude with creepy eyes. That's the thing, though. He couldn't look away. His mouth was dry, and it took a couple times for him to say it. Caleb Chalmers. Jimmy said nothing, but seemed startled. Jimmy. Lyster sat down backward on the remaining dining chair. He was there. He said he remembers yellow beaks. The old man narrowed his eyes and a shiver went up Caden's back. Why is that significant? Jimmy shrugged. Who can say with memories? You know what did it, Margaret burst out. You know, you can see it right now. I can see it in your aura. Auras are dangerous things to go snooping around in, witch, Jimmy growled. It's Margaret, Jaime, and you watch your mouth. The look on Jimmy's face when Margaret used the Mexican pronunciation made Caden want to laugh out loud, but the energy in the room was too electric. He froze, watching Margaret as she gave glare for glare back to the old guy. His money was on Margaret all day long and twice on Sundays. It's a theory, nothing more. Jimmy rubbed his jaw. Nothing to get excited about. She pointed a finger at him. You see something, don't you? Go out to eat with me and maybe I'll tell you. Jimmy stared her right in the eye. Margaret snorted. What makes you think I want ribs from a food truck? Who said anything about a food truck? Jimmy shot back. Your favorite is 3 Crowns. Why not go there? She narrowed her eyes. Now? You got someplace to be? Oregon, in point of fact. He waved his hand in the air, brushing that away. You're here for your son and not leaving anytime soon. And you need to eat. Fine. I accept. She stood up. You boys don't wait up for me. With that, she swept out of the apartment. Jimmy grinned and rose to follow. Jimmy, Lyster cried. What the fuck, man? The old man winked at Lyster. It'll be all right, son. We'll be back. The door closed on them both and plunged the apartment into silence. What the fuck just happened? Caden demanded. Lyster laughed outright, his teeth very white. What, you weren't ready for not 1 but 2 shamans this morning? Caden frowned. Margaret's a clairvoyant, not a shaman. Same thing, Lyster shrugged. Where were we? To shift from the soaring magic of As the Crow Flies into the intimate depths of Beneath the Surface, let's carry forward that theme of hidden truths, whether in fantasy realms or in our own everyday lives. Now I'd like to read from Beneath the Surface, a short story that will be part of my upcoming anthology. This piece dives into what we hide and what we reveal, the currents beneath everyday life. It's about discovery, truth, and the quiet transformations that happen when we dare to look deeper. Holy cow, Monty, what the hell? My voice carried, bouncing off the side of Monty's house and sounding louder than it really was. Hey, Monty! I yelled and waved my arms. Hey, Louise, he called back and cut the power to the jackhammer. What's wrong? Look, I pointed. What the? He laid the jackhammer on its side and walked over. When did that pop up? Monty, you must have hit the water main or something. Can't have. It's over there. He waved an imprecise hand toward the other side of the yard. No idea what this is. I edged closer. Water, brown with the stirred-up silt from Monty's labors, swirled up from the crack in the fence's foundation pole. Monty, it's rising. He knelt on the other side of the fence, and I could see his fingers poking around under the fence slats. Shit. What? He didn't say anything right away. It's salty. I stared down at the water. That's impossible. I poked a cautious finger into it and tasted. Sure enough, it was salty. Monty, there's no ocean around here. They always did say California was going to break off. That's not funny, I snapped. I'm serious here. How is there salt water in our backyard? His knees popped as he stood. I rose to meet his serious brown eyes. I don't know, Louise. I really don't. Maybe we'd better call the city? What do we say? Hi, there's an ocean in the desert? He shrugged. We have to report it. He glanced down. Your shoes are about to get wet. I stepped back, amazed. Monty, what if it doesn't stop? It'll flood our houses. We're on a hill, Louise. Calm down. It'll flood downtown first. I had visions of a wall of water sweeping down the Las Vegas Strip and almost laughed. He smirked. I realized with a slight shock he was trying to cheer me up. Thanks, Monty. He smiled, his teeth very white. No prob. I'll call my guy at the water district. Let's see what he says. Maybe it's a pipe or something. A pipe. He shrugged. What do you want me to say? He looked calculating. You got any more of that meatloaf? I laughed out loud. You need a wife, I said without thinking. He looked intense suddenly and then turned to his equipment. Yeah, that's what my mom keeps saying. He said it over his shoulder. For some reason, my heart was pounding and I felt hot. I'll go inside and make us some lunch while you call. He waved at me without turning around. I walked back inside to the air-conditioned hush and got out the meatloaf. Truth was, I had made it for him, but not to flirt. I just knew he liked meatloaf. At least that's what he always told me. What if there was more to it? This was silly. I hit the lights half angrily and set about making a salad and some sandwiches. I set everything up on plates, got down my tray and the pitcher of tea, and made sweet tea. I glanced outside and saw him pacing back and forth by the fence, his portable house phone glued to one ear. He didn't look happy. I walked out and set the tray on the table. He saw me and walked through the gate between our properties and sat down. Thanks, Mal, I'll let you know. He hung up and met my gaze. They'll come tomorrow at 10. He thinks I'm crazy, but he owes me for some work I did on his pool last fall. I looked over at the water. What if we are crazy? We're not, he mumbled through an enormous bite of sandwich. It's still rising. See the trickle there on my side of the fence? I craned my neck. Sure enough, there was a little brook forming, trundling along the fence toward our neighbors down the hill. What if it floods? I asked, afraid again. You know how flash floods happen. He shrugged. What do you want me to do? Sandbag it? He had a point. What could we do? I ate some more sandwich and worried. Louise, stop worrying. It's going to be fine. I heard a splash. Monty froze, and I could see the hairs on his neck wave a little bit. Weird. Hairs raising on the back of your neck was actually visible. Crap, he blurted, spraying breadcrumbs. Did you see that? Truthfully, I had been staring at his neck. No, what? He glanced at me, irritated, and then focused on the bubbling water. I looked over too, wondering what could capture his attention so fully. A black tail fin peeked up out of the water and then disappeared. I was on my feet so fast I didn't remember moving. Monty. My voice sounded breathy and weird. He joined me a second later as another ripple disturbed the water. Get in the house, Louise. You got your keys? Right here, I said, patting my pocket. Another fin, black and pointy, emerged slowly. By the time the eyebrow ridge appeared, we were both cowering behind my kitchen curtains. Where's your phone? Monty whispered hoarsely. You calling the police? No! The news! We had a brief wrestling match over the phone, which he won. He flipped it open and thumbed the camera button. He snapped 2 shots of the glossy black head as the thing climbed out of the hole. It was bipedal, covered in scales, and had dark purple eyes covered with some kind of web. It blinked vertically, opposite of a human, and stood about as tall as Monty. We watched it walk down the hill, following the water trail. No one is ever going to believe this, Monty murmured. It was then that I realized we were holding hands. Monty didn't seem inclined to let go, so I didn't either. I just watched the black creature disappear as the sun set over Sin City. Thank you for joining me on this journey, from the soaring magic of As the Crow Flies to the hidden depths of Beneath the Surface. Stories remind us that whether in fantasy or in everyday life, there's always more waiting to be discovered beneath what we first see. I'm so glad you guys are here to share that discovery with me.
So you do have a little bit of time left. Can you tell us when As the Crow Flies will be available, and also the inspiration for the second story that you did?
Absolutely. So As the Crow Flies is going to be in our new series called The Foundlings, and it'll be out in March of 2026. I'm still setting the exact date, but I'll announce that on my newsletter. And you guys are welcome to subscribe to that if you click the QR code on the screen. And it's going to be a lot of fun. It's about crow and raven shifters in an academy setting in the mountains of Washington State. And I'm going to be talking about it on my YouTube channel over the coming weeks and kind of sharing some of where the inspiration for it came from and stuff. For Beneath the Surface, that was a ton of fun to write. And it actually came out of a competition that I participated in clear back in 2008. And I'm going to actually edit it a little bit because nobody uses house phones anymore. But it was from a Flash a Day competition, or Fadness, FAD, in March. And it was ran parallel to the sports idea of March Madness. And so the concept was we got the prompt in the morning, and then we had to write 1,000 words, no more than 1,000 words by the end of the day. And so I decided, I didn't know how to write flash fiction. I've been a novelist my whole life. And I thought, you know what, this will be a fun way to learn. And I did it completely wrong in the beginning. The first 5 days, I ended up writing a novel, and I was just literally bouncing back and forth different characters in the same story using the prompt as an inspiration, and realized this is not the point. I'm supposed to be writing concrete short stories. And so I deliberately did. And the one for day 6, quite honestly, is awful. I will share it with folks, but it really was, I was like, okay, it's got to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I basically took the concept from the story of Helen Keller and her Annie Sullivan. So I was like, well, I can't keep doing that. Like, what am I going to do? Read an encyclopedia and tell stories of stuff I'm reading? So I started just really trying to lean into let's come up with stories. And something really fascinating happened. It's like Drew Davis talks about in his talk, Cube of Creativity, where when you put a constraint on something, creativity flourishes. And I would get the prompt in the morning, and I felt a lot of pressure to do it because I had to work. I work a Monday to Friday job. And so I would do it on the train into work. And I found if I listened for none of them took more than 5 minutes to hear an idea coming. And this one actually popped up pretty quickly. And the prompt for it was Hidden Spring. And I lived in Las Vegas for 2 years. It is not my preferred locale. I live in Washington State now in a rainforest. So that can tell you, kind of the polar opposite to Vegas. And I got the idea because I work in the insurance industry, and I got the idea of what happens if there's a pipe break and what if there's something living in the pipe, and there it went. So my little Finny guy is somewhere in Las Vegas, and nobody probably realizes that he's from the ocean. He probably has a show now on the Strip. Chrissy, I think you're still muted.
So I was going to say, we are running quite a bit early, actually. We're running about 10 minutes early, which is good. That's good.
Well, what was your idea? I'll have a question for you and then for Ember May, if I could.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Tina, Tina's nickname is Chrissy. I apologize. So Tina, when did you start Book Flood? Like, how did you come into this?
Book Flood this year actually came from, on Halloween, I read a short story called Chill of the Reaper, and that I had written and published, and it is much too short to go on to audio. And I know a lot of people had been putting stuff out on YouTube. So I thought, okay, I'll do that on Halloween. And I did that on Halloween, and I was going to read the story that I'm doing tonight, also on Halloween, or on tonight, also on YouTube. But then I invited you, and then you said, what if we invite other people? And I said, hey, that's a really good idea. And so then we invited all of you guys, and now we have Book Flood. But it's got its origins in Iceland during World War II, from when they had an abundance of paper and they couldn't get a lot of other things on the island. So on Christmas Eve, they exchanged books, and then they spend the evening reading books. And I think a lot of people that I remember, like the first time that I got a book was my dad's mother got me, she used to buy me books. And I think it's because she just didn't know what else to get me. And so that kind of made me become a reader. And the two things I remember is I got Betsy Tacy Tibbs stories. And I also got Beautiful Joe, which if you've never read, is the dog equivalent of Black Beauty. So it's a tearjerker and a half. But I did create a love of books, and especially around the holidays. And then my aunt started getting me books and that sort of thing. And I really do like them. So I was always kind of doing book flood before I knew there was a flood. But Amber can probably talk a little bit more about it because she actually lived in Iceland.
Oh, I would love that. And I wanted to ask you, Ember, to tell us a little bit more about where your story idea came from, unless you already talked about it. I came on a little bit late. I'm sorry about that.
No, I didn't. So it's fine. Yeah, so I did live in Iceland. So I grew up a military brat. My dad is in the Navy. And so I ended up in Iceland when I was 5 to 7. And so I was really into the Icelandic Christmas traditions. So when you guys talked about doing this, I was like, this is so cool. This is like full circle life stuff happening right now. So I was really, really excited. But the story ideas, so this series is based on, one, I tend to have characters that have unique professions. So my main character in that is a shoemaker, and she has her own little shop in a ski resort. And basically her dog keeps finding dead bodies. Like, we didn't get to the mystery part of the story because at this point the book I was reading was book 5. So the way that the books ended up being structured is it's like friends and family stuff at the beginning, mystery in the middle, friends and family stuff wrapped up at the end, typically, is kind of how it worked. And so, but yeah, she has a little West Highland Terrier that keeps finding dead, murdered people. And then she has to like solve the cases because she's being roped into it because her dog keeps finding the dead bodies. So that's kind of how it started. And then one of the things that never made sense to me in cozy mysteries as a genre, and it's one of the things we just accept as readers, but is why all of this, why all of a sudden there's all of these murders. So there is an answer to that question in the whole storyline. Like, there is a particular person that was doing a particular thing that has caused all of these people to be murdered in this ski resort. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. Basically, the story came about from a what if your dog keeps finding dead, specifically murdered people.
So the dog doesn't find just dead people. They have to be murdered. So if it's just Bob died of a heart attack, he's not interested in Bob.
Yep. I actually think I had him walk past a dead person on like a park bench who did like die of heart attack, and he just walked by, and they're like,
but why this one?
Are you serious?
There's a whole social commentary in there of how the dogs of the world avoid looking at the social fabric that is coming apart with the no, sorry, classes.
That's good. Well, so I'm gonna lead us into our next person just in case she needs a little bit more introduction. Annette is going to be reading next, and Annette contacted me yesterday to ask if she could read from her whip rather than the story she originally planned on reading because she was really excited about it. So, Annette, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and the story you're going to be reading?
Oh yes, I write fantasy. My first series was historical witch fantasy in the Wild West, which I had a lot of fun with that. It's a mashup of practical magic and Deadwood. So it's kind of gritty, but that was fun. But then this story, I did something with it in for Nano, and it's magical realism. It's about mental health and a craft this woman does, and it goes back into her through her ancestry. And then about 5 years ago, I found out that I am Puerto Rican. There's a little family secret. So I decided the book had to be set in Puerto Rico so I can discover my culture that I missed out on. So, and then magical realism is a prevalent theme in Hispanic culture. I've read some really good ones. So that's where this story came from, and I'm really excited about it because I think the issue of grief and loss and depression and there's so many stigmas with mental health. I wanted to bring that into a book so then readers could say, "Wow, that's me," and um, I I just want us to get rid of the stigma because we all go through difficulties.
Right, right.
So yeah, so my main character is a descendant of the Tayanos, the original indigenous people of Puerto Rico. So there is a lot of that. Um, their history will be incorporated in the story. Um, but yeah, I was just really excited about reading it because I'm going through editing and I love the story. So I don't know if anybody wanted, I could start now, or does anybody have
Absolutely.
any
Go ahead.
questions? Okay, all right. So this is called The Last Stitch of Memory. So chapter 1, What Cannot Be Mended. Elena Reyes opened the shutters of her workroom and let the Puerto Rico mountain air spill inside. Morning light slid across the cement floor and climbed the walls, waking the colors stacked there. Bolts of fabric rested on open shelves like a muted rainbow, indigo, ochre, river gray, and the soft brown of unbleached cotton. The room smelled of beeswax, ground coffee, and the faint mineral tang of stone warmed by the sun. Outside, a cuckoo frog called once, sharp and clear, before falling silent again. She moved through the space with practiced ease, setting things in order without thinking. A chair pulled closer to the work table, a cup rinsed and set to dry. The small radio left untouched. This was not a room for noise. In the far corner stood the altar. It was low and unassuming, built into a narrow shelf carved directly into the wall. No candles burned yet. No cloth covered it. There were only a few objects arranged with deliberate care. 3 smooth river stones, pale and heavy in the palm. A shallow clay bowl filled with water drawn from the Strulo town. A woven palm mat, faded with age. At the center sat a small carved figure of dark stone, its features softened by time and touch. Elena paused before it, pressing her fingers briefly to the cool surface of the shell. She bowed her head just slightly. Buenos dias, she murmured. She did not ask for permission, not yet. This was acknowledgement, not invitation. A greeting offered to the women who had stitched before her, whose names she carried in her blood, even when she did not speak them out loud. Her mother, her Abula, the ones further back, whose hands had worked fiber and bone long before needle and thread were tools of quiet mercy. She lit a single beeswax candle and placed it to the left of the stones. The flame steadied quickly. She dipped her fingers in the bowl of water and touched it to her wrist and her throat. Grounding, presence. She hummed a low, wordless tune, barely more than a breath shaped into sound. The melody did not belong to her, it had been given. Only then did she return to the work table. The quilt waited there, folded neatly, its weight familiar in her hands. Today would be an ending, not a beginning. Endings required care, they required witnesses. Elena rested her palms briefly on the fabric and closed her eyes. Stay with me, she whispered, to the room, to the stones, to the quiet that held her upright. The candle flickered once, then burned steady. By the time Mrs. Sia arrived, the light had shifted and the room was ready. The last stitch was always the hardest. It was the closing of a door, the turning of a key. For Mrs. Garcia, it was the final, quiet farewell to a husband she had loved for 53 years. Elena held the needle poised over the quilt. Indigo blues and dove grays absorbed the afternoon light slipping through the louvered shutters of her workshop. Mrs. Garcia's grief still clung to her, a cold weight that rounded her shoulders and pulled at the corners of her mouth. Elena plunged the needle into the cotton. She was not just sewing fabric, she was stitching memory. Beneath the surface of the physical world, the needle found a thin strand of sorrow, icy and silver. She coaxed it free and bound it to the crimson thread chosen for the final corner Zemi's sun. Crimson for resilience, for blood still moving through a living heart. She hummed as she worked, a wordless medley her Abula had taught her, the kind meant to soothe, to smooth what resisted being mended. She pulled the needle through. A soft sigh escaped Mrs. Garcia's lips. The old woman sat in a worn wicker chair across the room, her hands loosely clasped in her lap. As Elena drew the thread tight, the chill in the air receded. The heavy weight that had seemed to press down on the room lifted, drawn into the quilt as if by a subtle, silent vortex. The indigo fabric seemed to drink the sorrow, darkening for a fraction of a second before settling back into its color. The grief, now a permanent, harmless part of a pattern. Elena tied the knot, snipped the thread, and laid her hands flat on the finished piece. The quilt felt warm now, no longer thrumming with the cold energy of loss. It was complete, neutral, a repository of pain that could no longer cause pain. "It is done, Serafina," Elena said softly. Mrs. Garcia blinked, her eyes clearing as if waking from a long, troubled sleep. She looked around the workshop, at the stacks of fabric lining the walls and the jars of buttons gleaming like captured jewels. A slow, watery smile touched her lips. It was the first genuine smile Elena had seen on her face in the 6 months since her husband Raoul had passed. "Dios mío," she whispered, her voice raspy. She pushed herself to her feet, her movements a little less stooped, a little more certain. She walked to the work table and touched the quilt. Her hand rested on a square made from one of Raoul's old work shirts, a faded blue chambray. She traced the new crimson stitch. I don't feel it anymore," she said, her voice filled with disbelieving wonder. "The emptiness. It's not shouting at me." "It's not gone," Elena corrected gently. "The love is still there. The memories are still there. The ache is just quiet now. You'll be able to remember them without the drowning." For generations, the women of the Reyes family have been the quiet shepherds of sorrow for Las Colinas Doradas. They didn't use words like magic. They called it the gift, the work, or simply what we do. The townspeople didn't ask questions. They brought their pain, their grief-soaked clothing, their stories, and in return they received peace. They received a quilt. Mrs. Garcia nodded, her eyes welling with tears. But these were different tears, not the jagged shards of fresh grief, but the smooth, warm rain of release. She wrapped her arms around Elena, a fierce, bony hug that smelled of vanilla and plumeria. "Thank you, my girl," she murmured into Elena's hair. "Thank you." Elena held her, breathing in the scent of a hurt that was finally beginning to heal. This was the part that kept her going, the moment of release, the visible lightening of a soul. It was a powerful, addictive balm, a reminder that her fractured gift could still create wholeness in others. She helped Mrs. Garcia fold the quilt, the fabric now just fabric, its dangerous work complete. After the old woman left, her steps lighter as she walked down the cracked cement path toward the road. Elena stood alone in her workshop. The silence should have been a comfort, a peaceful void after the emotional intensity of the work. Instead, it felt vast and menacing. A single gust of wind rattled the house, slamming a loose shutter against its frame with a sharp crack. Crack. The sound was a key turning in a lock deep inside her. The scent of fabric and dust vanished, replaced by the briny metallic tang of salt water and terror. The gentle hum of the mountain was gone, swallowed by a deafening roar, a sound so immense it wasn't just heard, but felt, a vibration in her bones, in her teeth, the roar of a wind tearing the world apart. Glass shattered, not the memory of glass shattering, but the sound itself, sharp and immediate, echoing in the space behind her eyes. The floor tilted beneath her feet, the solid cement of the workshop, turning into churning black water. She wasn't in Las Colinas Doradas. She was 10 years in the past, water surging around her knees, the house groaning like a dying animal. Carlos, her own voice, a choked scream stolen by the wind. The image flashed, a single searing frame. The splinters remained of their front door, the ocean where their living room should have been. Elena gasped, her hands flying to her work table. Her fingers gripped the scarred wood so hard her knuckles turned white. She squeezed her eyes shut, forcing the memory down, wrestling the past back into its cage. Breathe. You're in your workshop. The floor is cement. The air smells of coffee. You are safe. The litany was old, worn smooth by a decade of repetition. She focused on the physical sensations of the present, the rough grain of the table under her palms, the solid weight of her own body, the distant crow of a rooster from the next hill over. Slowly the roaring receded. The ghost scent of salt faded. The floor stopped moving. She opened her eyes, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She was standing in her workshop. The sun was still slanting through the shutters. Nothing had changed. Everything had changed. A cold numbness spread through her limbs, a familiar and unwelcome frost. It was the price of suppression. To shove the monster back into its box required her to climb in with it, leaving only a hollow shell to go about the business of living. With stiff automated movements, she began to clean her workspace. She swept stray threads from the floor, organized spools by color, and covered her sewing machine. Each action was precise, controlled, a desperate attempt to impose order on a world that had just dissolved into chaos. The hallway divided her house into two. On one side, the studio, the place of work and magic, the other, the living space, bedrooms, and kitchen. Crossing the threshold was like passing through a membrane into another life. The air in the house was warmer, carrying the scent of toasting coffee beans and oregano. The small radio on the counter hummed old boleros, the singer's voice syrupy with a longing Elena could no longer feel. She moved to the kitchen, a small welcoming space with clay mugs hanging from hooks and bundles of dry herbs swaying from the rafters. The counter was tiled in mismatched squares, a history of repairs made by her own hands. She began to prepare dinner, her movements efficient, her face a placid mask. She was a ghost in her own home, haunting the edges of her own life. Smells good. Mateo stood in the doorway, his 16-year-old frame all sharp angles and restless energy. He had his father's dark curly hair and her watchful eyes. He was holding his phone, but his attention was entirely on her. He had been a silent, unknowing witness to these moments for a decade. He didn't know what caused them, but he always knew when one had happened. He could read the stillness in her, the way her smiles didn't quite reach her eyes. Just agit on foil, she said, her voice even, too even. Mrs. Garcia seemed happy when she left, he said, leaning against the doorframe. It wasn't a question, it was a probe. Her was finished, Elena replied, stirring the rice. The metal spoon scraped against the bottom of the pot. Mateo fell silent, scrolling through his phone, but she could feel his gaze on her. He was the guardian of her secrets, even the ones he didn't understand, her anchor to the present day, the living, breathing reason she had to keep fighting the tide that threatened to pull her under. His presence was both a comfort and an agony. He was so much like his father, and in his face she saw the ghost of the daughter she'd lost. Dinner was a quiet affair. They sat at a small wooden table in the living room. A woven rug brightened the cement floor, and a photograph of her Abula, her face creased with a knowing smile, sat beside a bowl of river stones. Mateo ate quickly, his knee bouncing under the table. He tried to draw her out, showing her a funny video of a cat playing a tiny piano. She made the right sound, a soft huff of air that was a passable imitation of a laugh. He talked about school, about a stupid argument his friend had over a video game. He described the new design he's sketching in his book, a model of an old Spanish galleon. Elena listened, nodded, and asked the appropriate questions. Did you finish the rigging yet? Is Sophia still not talking to him? But her responses felt flimsy, constructed of words that had no weight to them. A wall of glass stood between her and the vibrant, messy world her son inhabited. She could see it, she could hear it, but she couldn't touch it. The numbness had stolen the texture of life from her. He knew she wasn't really there. Finally, he gave up, his shoulders slumping slightly. He pushed his plate away and looked at her, his expression a mixture of teenage frustration and a deep, weary concern. Are you okay, Mom? He asked, the question soft but pointed. I'm just tired, Neil. She lied. The lie was as worn and familiar as a favorite thimble. It was a long day. He didn't believe her. He never did. But he had learned long ago that pushing would only make her retreat further. He just nodded, collecting their plates. Okay, I have homework anyway. He disappeared in his room. The sounds of a guitar-heavy rock song soon filtered from under his door. Elena sank back into the patched sofa, the silence of the house rushing back in. The boleros from the kitchen radio seemed to mock her with their passionate sorrow. The singer could feel, he could mourn. She looked down at her hands, resting in her lap, hands that could take the weight of another person's sorrow and fold it into cloth. Hands strong and practiced, fingertips stained with indigo, nails kept short for work. The hands of a healer. She felt like a fraud. The echo of the wind still whispered at the edges of her hearing. Cold settled deeper into her bones. She could carry the grief of the entire town, stitch by careful stitch, but her own loss remained untouched, sealed behind a door she refused to open. The gift flowed through her like a river she could divert for anyone else's land. For her, it only threatened to flood. She sat there as the house quieted, knowing with a clarity that frightened her more than the memory itself that one day the dam would fail. And when it did, she wasn't sure there would be anything left to say. Chapter 2. This chapter is called Clean Lines. The road into Las Colinas Doradas fought Lazaro Salazar at every turn. It bucked and coiled, a narrow ribbon of cracked asphalt poured directly over the rims of the mountain. He gripped the wheel of his rental, the leather already slick under his palms. The sea breeze chased him up from the coast, but did little to cut the humid air, thick with damp earth and something cloyingly sweet like fruit left too long in the heat. This place felt a century behind San Juan, maybe two. The urban sprawl had given way to fields of sugarcane, then dense green walls of jungle, and now this. Houses appeared at random, clinging to the hillsides on stilts that defied his sense of engineering. They were painted in defiant sun-bleached colors, turquoise, mango, hibiscus pink, that clashed with the somber dignity of the mountains looming behind them. Every crooked street and sagging roof seemed to defy gravity by habit alone. His phone had lost signal 10 minutes ago. He wasn't surprised. This was a town that ran on whispers and cafe con leche, not cell towers. Finally, the road widened slightly and flattened into something resembling a town. He navigated past a small plaza where a colonial-era fountain sputtered weakly, its stone basin green with algae. A handful of old men occupied weathered benches under the shade of a massive tree, watching his car pass with slow, unblinking curiosity. Outsider. The label was as clear as the sign hung around his neck. He found the address he'd been given, a two-story concrete building with a pharmacy on the ground floor and a set of apartments above. His unit 2B was at the back, overlooking a tangle of banana trees and the tin roof of a neighboring house. He parked and hauled his 2 suitcases and a long cardboard tube up the echoing concrete steps. Apartment was exactly as the rental agent has described it, sterile. White walls, generic gray tile floors, a kitchen with appliances that still had the plastic wrap on the handles. The furniture was minimal, functional, and soulless. A firm couch, a small dining room table with two chairs, a bed with a mattress still encased in crackling plastic. It was a blank canvas. It was perfect. Lazaro dropped his bags and walked to the window, pushing aside the stiff vinyl blinds. The view was a mess of tangled green and rusting metal. He let the blinds snap shut, closing it off. Here, inside the clean, right-angled walls, he could think. This project, it was his chance, a way to wash the bitter taste of his last partnership out of his mouth. He could still see Ricardo's face, that practiced, apologetic smile as he explained how their firm was collapsing, how the investors had pulled out, how the funds had simply disappeared. It had been a messy, catastrophic failure, built on handshakes and mutual trust that had turned out to be a one-way street. The fallout had cost Lazaro 2 years of his life, and his belief in anything that couldn't be quantified, measured, and locked down on a contract. He would not make that mistake again. This development in Las Colinas Dorales was his design, his funding, his vision. It would be clean, efficient, and logical, something real, something with a clear purpose that couldn't be eroded by messy emotions and misplaced faith. He would build a legacy of concrete and steel, a structure immune to betrayal. He unzipped his suitcase and began to unpack, his movements precise. Shirts in a closet arranged by color, toiletries lined up on the bathroom counter, his laptop set squarely in the center of the small table. Order, control. These were the foundations upon which he built anything that was meant to last. The sun began to set, casting long, distorted shadows across the valley. The air cooled marginally, and the chirping of tiny frogs began its incessant nightly course. Restless, Lazaro decided to walk. He needed to see the town again, not a driver navigating its obstacles, but as an architect assessing its flaws. He needed to measure the decay. He locked the apartment door behind him and walked back toward the town square. The evening had drawn more people out. The air smelled of wood smoke and frying onions. Music drifted from an open doorway, a nostalgic bolero full of heartache and longing. Lazaro registered an ambient noise, a cultural data point. The square was the heart of the town, and it showed all the signs of neglect he'd learned to recognize. He stopped near the fountain and began his silent assessment. The plumbing was obviously shot. The flow was inconsistent, and the pump whined with effort. The stonework was crumbling, a clear liability. The tree, while impressive, was a maintenance nightmare. Its roots likely wreaking havoc on the subterranean pipes, and its branches a threat in any major storm. Near the edge of the square, just beyond the sputtering fountain, Lazaro slowed. Set into the stonework of a low wall were several small carvings, their forms abstracted by age, rounded hues, geometric lines, stylized figures that suggested eyes more than depicted them. They were smooth like countless hands, their edges softened by weather and touch. He paused long enough to register them. Folk motifs, he decided. Indigenous inspired, perhaps, aesthetic nods to heritage, the kind of detail municipalities like to highlight on walking tours and informational plaques. Symbolic, not structural. He made a mental note to preserve them in situ or relocate them as part of the redesign. Cultural continuity mattered to stakeholders even when the infrastructure beneath it needed replacing. A woman passed him then, brushing her fingers lightly over one of the carvings as she walked, not breaking stride. The gesture was unconscious, habitual. Lazaro looked once more at the stone, then continued on, already calculating load-bearing limits and pedestrian flow. Whatever meaning the shapes held for the town, they were decorative. He paced the perimeter, his eyes cataloging every crack in the pavement, every peeling facade on the surrounding buildings. Wasted potential. That was the phrase that looped in his mind. The old colonial storefronts could be stunning with the right investment. Boutique hotels, high-end restaurants. Instead, they housed dusty hardware stores and a tiny colmado with a hand-painted sign. It was quaint, he supposed. If he found inefficiency charming, he didn't. A group of teenagers sat on the fountain's edge laughing loudly, their faces lit by the blue glow of their phones. Children chased each other through the square, their shrieks echoing in the twilight. On the benches, the old men had been joined by women, their conversations a low, steady murmur. They were the keepers of the status quo, the living anchors holding this town in the past. His gaze fell on a single-story structure just off the square. Its blue paint was weathered, its tin roof streaked with rust, but the lines were simple, honest. A house with what looked like a workshop attached. Wooden shutters were thrown open to the evening air. For a moment, a warm golden light spilled from within, and he could just make out shelves stacked high with colorful fabrics. Then the light was gone, the interior sinking back into shadow. He filed the detail away, a local artisan perhaps, a quilt maker or seamstress, an economic unit to be factored into the new plan. This town didn't need patching up. It didn't need cosmetic repairs or a sentimental nod to the past. It needed a vision, a comprehensive overhaul. It needed his vision. He could already see it. The plaza repaved with modern, sustainable materials. The fountain replaced with a sleek water feature artfully lit. The old storefronts, their historic facades preserved, but their interiors gutted and rebuilt to code, ready for new, profitable businesses that would cater to the incoming wave of eco-tourists. He would create jobs. He would generate revenue. He would give Las Colinas Doradas a future, a place on the map that wasn't just a footnote in a history book. He wasn't just an architect. He was a problem solver. And this town was the most beautifully complex, frustratingly illogical problem he'd ever seen. He walked back to his apartment, his stride now filled with purpose. The frogs sang louder now, a deafening, rhythmic wall of sound. The bolero had been replaced by a pulsing salsa beat. He barely noticed. His mind was already moving, calculating, mapping out new pedestrian walkways, drafting the speech he would give at the first town meeting. He would come prepared with charts, with projections, with undeniable facts. How could they argue with logic? How could they choose the slow, managed decay over the progress he was offering? Back inside the sterile quiet of his apartment, he felt a surge of pure, unadulterated confidence. This was his element. He retrieved the long cardboard tube he carried up earlier and untwisted the cap. With a quiet rasp, he unrolled the pristine blueprints across the dining table, weighing the quarters down with his wallet and keys. There it was, Las Colinas Doradas reimagined, a symphony of clean lines, green spaces, and logical flow. The winding, nonsensical streets were straightened, the hodgepodge of decaying buildings were replaced by an elegant, unified design. It was beautiful. It was rational, and once they saw it, he was certain they would understand. He ran his hand over the smooth, crisp paper. This document was the antidote to the messy, unpredictable world outside his window. It was a promise of order in a land of chaos. Reshaping this town, he felt with a deep, satisfying sense of certainty, would be a short, straightforward matter. His logic was undeniable. The plan was perfect. All right, chapter 3. Take it a minute. Chapter 3 is subtitled The First No, and it's just something good. The numbness from the day before had settled in like a low-grade fever, a dull hum beneath her skin that muted the world's colors. Elena went to the town meeting out of a sense of weary obligation, the same quiet duty that made her sweep the porch each morning and pay her electric bills on time. It was simply what one did. Las Colinas Doradas was a town that ran on participation, on the simple cumulative power of showing up. Mateo walked beside her, his long-legged stride easily keeping pace with hers. He had offered to stay home, a flicker of concern in his eyes that he told her he was still monitoring her emotional weather, but she had insisted. Letting him retreat to his room would have felt like a concession to the coldness that gripped her. Being a mother, being present for him, was the one bit of solid ground she could always find, even when the rest of her inner world was underwater. Think they'll finally fix the street lights on Cala Luna? He asked, hands shoved in the pockets of his jeans. We can hope, Elena said, her voice softer than she intended, but I think it'll be another speech about garbage collection. The town square was already filling up. The suffocating heat of the afternoon had finally broken, and a breeze whispered down from the mountains, carrying the scent of the night-blooming jasmine and grilling meat from someone's backyard. The sky was a deep velvet purple, and the first stars were beginning to prick through. The coqui frogs set the backdrop of a subtle rhythm. The old men were in their usual spots on the benches, their low conversation a gravelly counterpoint to the shrieks of children chasing each other around the sputtering fountain. The weak halogen lights cast a warm, if insufficient, glow over the scene, turning the square into an outdoor living room. This was the town's heart, and it beat with a slow, steady, familiar rhythm. Elena felt a distant ache of affection for it. She saw history here, not just in the colonial stonework of the fountain, but in the warm hollows of the benches where generations of residents had sat, in the names carved in the trunk of the massive tree, in the mismatched tiles around the fountain's edge, each story a different repair in a different decade. This place wasn't a monument, it was a living scrapbook. They found a spot near the back, leaning against the low wall that separated the plaza from the street. Mayor Ortiz, a portly man with a perpetually sweating brow, was tapping a microphone, producing a series of painful squeals that made children giggle. Friends, neighbors, he boomed, his voice echoing slightly. Thank you for coming. Elena let his words wash over her. It was the usual litany, a reminder of the upcoming festival of San Pedro, a complaint about dogs getting into the trash, a condemnation for the school's soccer team. She felt Mateo shift beside her, already bored, probably scrolling through his phone. She learned to appear attentive while her mind remained safely distant, a trick she perfected over the last 10 years. Then the mayor's tone changed. And now for the reason we have gathered. As many of you know, our town has been chosen for a significant redevelopment project, a chance to bring Las Colinas Doradas into the 21st century, to introduce our unique home to the world and secure our economy for generations to come. A murmur rippled through the crowd, a mix of curiosity and suspicion. Elena's focus sharpened slightly. I'd like to introduce the architect between this visionary project, the mayor continued, gesturing grandly. He comes to us with great acclaim from San Juan. Please welcome Lazaro Salazar. A man stepped forward from the shadows near the mayor's side. He was tall, dressed in a crisp linen shirt and dark trousers that seemed too formal for the square, too clean. He moved with a quick, contained energy that felt jarringly urban against the town's languid pace. Elena recognized him instantly. He was the outsider from the rental car she'd seen yesterday, the one the old men had been watching. He carried a long tube, and with an efficient movement, he unrolled a massive sheet of paper onto a folding table, weighing the corners down with smooth gray rocks he produced from his pockets. Blueprints. Good evening, he said, his voice clear and confident, amplified by the microphone. It was a voice accustomed to being listened to. My name is Lazaro Salazar, and it's my honor to propose a new future for Las Colinas Doradas. Helena watched him, a detached observer behind her wall of ice. He was handsome, she noted clinically, with kind eyes that seemed at odds with the rigid set of his jaw. He spoke of logic, of the potential of maximizing assets. He used words like streamlining, optimization, and profitability. They were cold, sterile words, stripped of any warmth of humanity. They felt like stones dropping into the deep well of the town's history. This tone possesses an undeniable charm, he said, and Elena felt a prickle of irritation. He said charm the way a biologist might describe a particular but harmless fungus. My goal is not to erase that charm, but harness it to create a sustainable model for ecotourism that would bring prosperity without sacrificing your identity. He gestured to the blueprint, a web of clean lines and stark white spaces. We begin here with the heart of the town, the square. His fingers traced a perfect sterile circle. We will repave the plaza with modern permeable materials. The fountain, a beautiful but insufficient centerpiece, will be replaced with a sleek, self-contained water feature that recycles its own water. A wave of disgruntled whispers washed through the crowd. Mrs. Sawdo, who ran the bakery, muttered, "My grandson carved his first initial in that fountain." Lazaro either didn't hear or didn't care. He forged on, his confidence unshakable. The old market building, which is structurally unsound, will be demolished. In its place, a modern two-story structure with retail space on the ground floor for high-end craft boutiques and a small hotel on the second. He was talking about the building where Elena's Abula had sold her first quilts, the building where farmers still sold their freshest produce every Saturday morning. Something inside Elena began to thaw, a dangerous, unfamiliar heat. The contrast of his sterile blueprints to her quilts was the difference of San Juan, where he came from, and the charm of her home. He continued, pointing to the winding, narrow streets on his map. These roads will be straightened and widened to allow better traffic flow and tour bus access. The numbness was receding, burning away by a rising tide of disbelief and a slow, simmering anger. He wasn't just talking about buildings and streets. He was talking about erasing the paths worn by their ancestors, paving over places where stories were born. Their homes were a problem to be solved, an illogical equation to be balanced. Then his gaze swept over the crowd, over the square, and for a moment it seemed to land on the street where her own house stood, the one with the workshop. His expression didn't change, but she saw it, a dispassionate assessment of an architect, identifying another variable, another outdated structure to be factored into his grand logical design. That's when it snapped. It wasn't a conscious decision. It was an instinct, raw and protective, that she hadn't felt in a decade, a force rising from a deep, dormant part of her. She felt her spine straighten. The air seemed to clear, the world coming in a sharp, painful focus. She caught Mateo's eyes. He was staring at her, his phone forgotten. His expression was one of pure shock. His mouth slightly open. He saw it. He saw the fire coming back into her eyes. Elena stepped forward, her heart hammering, not with fear, but with a fierce, brilliant clarity. She didn't wait for the mayor to ask her questions. Her voice cut through the murmuring crowd, stronger and sharper than she'd ever heard it. "You can't." Lazaro Salazar stopped speaking. The microphone amplified the sudden silence. Every head in the plaza turned toward her. "I'm sorry?" Lazaro asked, his polite smile not quite reaching his eyes. He looked at her as if she were a minor, unexpected, calculated error. "You can't," Elena repeated, stepping out from behind the wall. She felt hundreds of eyes on her, but the only ones she saw were his. "You can't just pave over it." "I'm not paving over it," he countered smoothly, gesturing to his plans. "I'm improving it, modernizing, creating opportunities." "You're erasing it," she said, her voice gaining strength with every word. "That fountain. Do you know how many children have learned to count by tracing the carvings on its side? Those cracked tiles you want to replace? My father helped lay some of those tiles with his own hands after Hurricane Clara. They're crooked, yes. They're imperfect, but they're ours." She took another step toward him, a current of energy flowing through her. "You talk about our town's charm as if it's a spice you can bottle and sell, but it's not. It's in the crookedness. It's in the stories. It's in the memory of the hands that built this place. The old market isn't structurally unsound. It's where Mrs. Garcia's father sold his coffee beans for 40 years. Straightening the roads won't make traffic flow better. It'll just make it easier for people to pass through without ever seeing us." She was standing at the edge of the crowd now, her hands clenched at her sides. She could feel the town at her back, a silent, powerful chorus of agreement. "This place," she said, her voice dropping but losing none of its intensity, "is not a business brand. It's not an asset to be harnessed. It's our home. And its soul is woven into every crack in the pavement, every peeling coat of paint you want to tear down. You can't build a future here by bulldozing our past." She took a breath. "Go back to the city. You don't belong here." Oh, that was harsh. A flush came over her face. She caught the nod from Enos and some of the town elders. Her shoulders squared. Silence, a profound, ringing silence fell over the square. Even the frogs seemed to have paused their course. Lazaro stared at her, his confidence finally faltering. The mask of polished professional slipped, revealing a flicker of genuine bewilderment. She wasn't arguing with his facts or his figures. She was speaking in a language of memory and feeling, a language for which he had no blueprint. My plan will bring jobs, he said, his voice tight with controlled frustration. It'll bring money to this community. It will ensure Las Colinas Dorales has a future. Are you arguing against progress? I'm arguing for a progress that remembers where it came from, she reported, not one that requires an amputation. Mayor Ortiz, sensing he was losing control, bustled forward. Thank you, Alina. Some very passionate points. Perhaps we can discuss. But the spell was broken. A chorus of voice rose up in support. She's right, called out Mr. Hernandez from the hardware store. Leave the fountain alone. We don't need your tour buses. Even the frog's course returned. Elena watched Lazaro's confidence falter as he slowly rolled up his blueprints. The crisp rasp of paper sounded impassably loud in the sudden quiet. He was an architect, a problem solver, but he faced a problem he couldn't quantify. A wall of sentiment, of shared history. He slowly, deliberately began to roll up his blueprints. The meeting dissolved into clusters of animated conversation. Several people came to clap Elena on the shoulder, their faces alight with pride and gratitude. Well said, Elena. Gracias, Mia. She accepted their words with a series of numb nods, the adrenaline beginning to drain away, leaving her feel shaky and exposed. The fire had burned through the frost, but the rawness underneath was tender. Mateo came to her side, his eyes wide. Mom, he breathed, a universe of awe in that single word. That was, wow. He looked at her not as fragile, distant woman she had been yesterday, but as a warrior. A fierce pride swelled in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with her gift and everything to do with her son. As the crowd began to thin, a woman detached herself from the deep shadows of the tree. Her hair was a stark white crown, her face a beautiful map of wrinkles, and her eyes were sharp and dark as obsidian. Venus Crespo, a close friend of her Beulah, a woman who carried the town's oldest stories in her bones. She was the only person in Las Colinas Dorales who, Elena felt, truly saw her not just as the quilter or Mateo's mother, but as the next in the Reyes line. Ina stopped in front of her. She didn't smile or offer praise. She just watched Elena with that penetrating, all-knowing gaze, as if she was inspecting the quality of a stitch. After a long moment, she gave a single sharp nod of approval. Then, leaning in, just close enough for Elena to hear, she said, her voice a dry rasp, some men think you can build over a soul. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Enos turned and walked away, her small frame disappearing into the twilight, leaving Elena standing in the center of an empty square. The statement wasn't just about Lazaro and his sterile blueprints. It felt like a warning, a challenge, a stone tossed in deep, still waters of her own life. She stood there, the hum of defiance still vibrating under her skin. I looked down at her hands, the hands that stitched stories, that contained griefs. She had just fought to protect her town's soul, but Enos's words left a chilling echo in the sudden quiet, a question that coiled in the pit of her stomach. What about her own?
Well, thank you, Annette. Good job. You got a comment from I'll put it back up here again. You may have missed it.
Yeah.
From
I
Alex.
caught it in the corner of my eye. Thank you, Alex.
Very good, very good. All right. Well, our next reader is did we lose her? I'm just not seeing her. Oh, there she is. Emerald Williams is going to be our next reader. So let me take the full-length camera off Annette there. Annette, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and the piece that you're going to be reading?
Okay. I'm going to be reading from my book, The Chosen Unleashed, which is book 3 in the Chosen of Brindir series. There's 6 books in the series, so we're just going to pop in the middle, mainly because it's a Christmas story. I'll give you a little background. The story revolves around Rhiannon, who is our main character. She is a third-year emergency medicine resident in Galveston, Texas, and she is working on her very last rotation of her residency. No more. She can go out and practice. Everything's wonderful, except for this little hurricane that comes along and blows her away. She lands in Brindir, and Brindir is a land filled with magic, and it's also filled with an evil sorceress who wants her dead the minute she knows she's landed. The reason she wants her dead is because she's wearing a pendant, and the pendant is actually a talisman. And Rhiannon is the one who has prophesied to use the talisman to defeat Agrona, the sorceress, at the very last battle. So, of course, she wants her dead before she gets a chance to figure out what's going on. She gets rescued by Prince Alistar, who has his own battles to fight, and gets taken to the keep, where she learns how to use some of her new powers. The story progresses, and she and Alistar actually fall in love. But she cannot be in love with him. It is against her principles, because she knows that he is in love with another woman. He is in love with Aelith, who is the second mistress of the Healer's Hold. And she has even heard him use the word love to her, and she is certain that that is his secret love. The only problem is that's his sister, and everybody seems to know this except for her, because it's a royal secret, because that makes her the second heir, and they don't want Agrona to go after her. So everybody is very confused about why she will not accept Alistar's love. He goes off to fight the war. He even asks her to wait for her, and she rebuffs him, even though it's killing her to do so. So Alistar and his father, Ulrich, have just come back to the keep to visit for just a short period of time. Ulrich actually has to go back immediately. There's been an attack, and they were able to see the queen and see Rhiannon, but they are all back at the war, and she is left here in the cold of the winter in the keep. After a long soak in the tub, reclimbed into her four-poster bed, sank into the deep feather mattress, and pulled the curtains for warmth. Seal, who is a large feline who has mental telepathy abilities, by the way, hopped onto the end of the bed. The black Katzen blended into the darkness, only his glowing yellow eyes giving away his presence. I understand the prince was here today. I am sorry I missed him. Is he well? Seal Mind spoke to her. She sighed. Yes, he came to report another attack. One of the towers was destroyed by wraiths. No one knows where they went or what the next attack might involve. He came to get Lord Ulrich. The queen will have to lead the solstice ceremony tomorrow without him. We will have to help her. You know, we're going to have to help her. Indeed. I sense security will need to be increased with this development. I now have 8 other Katzen here at the keep. We will continue to patrol the deep and dark ways where the forces and practitioners do not venture. We will alert you of any intrusions from hidden ways. Seal, if it wasn't for you, we would not have known of the worm attack. You have kept us safe from things we never dreamed of. Well, I am Katzen. I am good at finding things. She smiled into the darkness. He loved to remind everyone of that. Thank you, Seal. Between you and Alistar, I have the best protectors in the world. I sense that you are unsettled tonight. Did you and Alistar have a chance to talk while he was here? Well, he was not here but a few minutes. I'm tired, Seal. Well, we have a long day tomorrow with the ceremony, she said, deflecting the conversation. Sweet dreams, friend. Tomorrow is the solstice. She rolled over and snuggled deep into her soft woolen blankets. The physical comforts would not matter. She would not rest well that night. I bid you happy solstice. Sleep well. I am willing to listen when you are ready to talk. He still did not understand her reticence to discuss the prince. Humans were very confusing. The next morning dawned late. Sharp north winds tugged at the final leaves, stubbornly clinging to the orchard trees in the clear, crisp weather. The solstice celebration was upon them. Men busied themselves preparing a pyramid of firewood for the bonfire, while the cooks and kitchen staff worked nonstop, baking and preparing for all the forces, practitioners, staff, families, and visitors to the keep arriving for the yearly holiday. The queen would light the fire at sunset, and the center log would burn continuously until it was nothing but ash. The holiday would not end until the fire went out, which usually lasted 3 or 4 days. At dawn tomorrow morning, the queen would declare the night was over and welcome back the sun. This was the promise of the solstice. Light would always banish the dark, even after the longest night. Rhiannon tried to be helpful, but was chased out of the kitchen by Cook. She retreated to the healer's office, but none of the novices were there for lessons today. She inventoried their supplies, cross-referenced her new equipment from the metalsmith and the glassblower guilds, and made sure she had enough for the keep and enough to send back to the hold. She wanted to try out her ideas for IV fluids, but was glad no one had needed that intense level of care. What Rhi really wanted was to prepare her own private celebration for Christmas. If her count was correct, 4 more days from now would be the 25th. It would mean nothing to anyone on this world, but to her it did matter. Christmas was her time of year. She had asked Regan if someone could dig her up a small pine tree and keep it in the garden room. The request garnered her a strange look, but the next day a small potted tree had appeared as requested. When her mother was alive, they had put a tree with decorations up every year. At first, homemade ornaments from grade school adorned the branches, but as she got older, her mom brought her new glass ornaments every year. She would have to settle for paper chains for garlands, but she had asked the glass blowers if they would make her a single ornament, just a round glass ball that she could hang on the tree for old time's sake. She also made a paper angel for the top of the tree. Pretty crude, but it was the thought that counted. As evening approached, the queen summoned Rhi to the royal audience chamber to prepare before going outside to the fire circle where the solstice log would burn in the large square in front of the keep. The crowd was loud and excited, but quieted as Margaret appeared and held up her hands for silence. Forces, practitioners, healers, friends, and family, I wish the blessings of the solstice upon you all. This year, we well know the sacrifices being made on our behalf. Please keep our distant forces in your prayers for safe return. The crowd murmured quietly, respectfully bowing their heads. The sun was dipping behind the horizon, just a burning sliver of golden brightness, disappearing into inky darkness before it vanished. As Queen of Brindir, I bid you all be not afraid of the darkness. From darkness we will emerge into light. She held her hand and conjured a ball of fire, swirling flames reaching upward into the night. Without darkness, we cannot appreciate the light. Without cold, we do not find comfort in warmth. Without conflict, we can never understand peace. I light this fire to be a beacon through the longest night. Let it burn and warm your hearts and minds, reminding you that tomorrow the days will begin to lengthen and the sun returns. And with it will return the promise of spring and the plenty of summer. We shall survive the cold days of winter, knowing that spring will always come. She tossed the fireball into the wooden pyramid, igniting the solstice log. A cheer went up from the crowd. Singing broke out, and Rhiannon was engulfed by waves of hope and joy from the celebrants as the overflowing emotions washed over her like a rising tide. She looked at the queen and could tell she was overwhelmed with the force of the emotions as well. They withdrew to the royal audience chamber, now filled with a complex mixture of tantalizing aromas from the tables piled with food and drink. Large platters of cold sliced forcemeat, chunks of cheese, and roasted root vegetables set next to bowls of fresh pickled eggs, beets, and carrots. Roasted turkeys were sliced and covered in giblet gravy. A partially carved leg of lamb was surrounded with crisp fried kale and bowls of mint jelly. Savory pastries redolent with onion and garlic were stuffed with ham and mustard. An entire table was filled with sliced breads, rolls, buns, and crispy flatbreads. The dessert table overflowed with bowls of spiced pears floating in honey syrup, preserved peaches baked into tiny tarts, prunes stuffed with sweet cheese, and baskets of mince, apple, and pumpkin hand pies. A tall spiced cake took center place among the desserts, decorated with almond paste figures and flowers. And of course, there were countless varieties of cookies and cook's cakes. Soon the celebrants would be invited to enter and the feasting would begin. Seal was there waiting for them while he snagged tidbits from the servers. Your Majesty, all is quiet in the keep. I have asked one of my catsen to stay with you this evening. I would sleep better if you would accept the extra security. Seal, I do not think any of us will be getting much sleep tonight with that party going on outside, but I appreciate your thoughtfulness to keep me safe. A silver blue catsen walked up and sat before the Queen. Your Majesty, I am Azul. I am half-brother to Seal. I will stay with you and pledge to keep watch over you through the night. I am honored by your service, young catsen. Rhiannon, we must be up at dawn to declare the longest night is finished. I suggest we eat and retire early. As predicted, no one slept well that night. The celebrations were still ongoing when Margaret and Rhiannon returned to the bonfire just before dawn. The crowd gathered around the fire. The singing faded, and the silence now descended over the courtyard. Across the kingdom, villages and towns gathered around their own solstice logs in universal anticipation of the dawn. As a slim crescent of the sun crept above the horizon, the Queen intoned the traditional greeting. Behold, the longest night is over. The sun returns in all its glory. Rejoice and celebrate the new year. Solstice blessings upon all across our kingdom. May the One continue to protect us. May the avenging dragon spread his wings over us. Rejoice for the renewal of life. Cheers erupted and the crowd began to sing and dance around the fire. The Queen and Rhi withdrew from the crowd into the refuge of the keep. Raw emotions pouring from the celebrants were exhausting for the magicals. Your Majesty, how long will this go on? Rhi hadn't expected the celebration to be so raucous. I thought they'd slow down once the sun came up. Oh, my child, this is tame. Some years we must use the forces to break up the crowds. We will allow this exuberance as long as it stays outside and is not destructive. The people need this time to share with family and friends. And it's not unusual for many babies to be born 9 months from now. This holiday will go on until the solstice log is completely burned. But I, for one, will return to my apartment for peace and quiet. Go celebrate if you want, but my celebration was having Lord Ulrich at home, even if such a brief time. She smiled and headed off to her apartment, Azul and Toll. Rhiannon heartily agreed. She snitched a few more delicacies from the tables still laden with food before she and Seal headed back to their own room for a nap. Inwardly, she smiled. I must be getting old to give up on a wild party. Across the kingdom, the traditional words of welcome were said, welcoming the sun's return by village leaders, elders, farmers, and soldiers. A collective sigh of relief accompanied the dawn and the return of the light. They had survived the solstice without the approaching evil attacking during the night. Hope returned with the sun. Agrona had plans for that hope. She planned to crush the life out of the kingdom, to make every last person feel the weight and power of darkness, her darkness. Her plan was progressing. The race had destroyed the watchtower, giving them entry into the kingdom. They searched for the perfect hiding area where her troops could be secluded until she called for the upcoming attack. They had found a series of caverns hidden from casual view. It took weeks, but a band of mages had slipped past the destroyed watchtower and now, under the cover of magic, headed to the secret location. Once established, they would begin portaling her reserve troops to the cavern. When all was ready, she would mount a frontal attack from the swamps with her primary force. Then, coming secretly from behind, her ambush force would strike Brindir's unprotected flank. Together, they would crush the kingdom's forces like a pecan in a nutcracker. An evil smile played on her lips as she cackled in anticipation. Soon victory would be hers. The solstice log burned for 3 days before the last embers died. The ashes were swept and saved for the equinox blessing of the fields. Folk went back to work, some hung over from the celebration, many just tired but happy to have a new year in front of them. Ree had planned her own celebration. By her estimation, tonight was Christmas Eve. She spent the morning finishing her paper decorations in the healer's office, then collected her ornament from the glass blowers. It was a simple globe, just what she wanted. Everything was brought back to the garden room for decorating that evening. Ree made a special trip to the livery to visit Sunny. That's her horse that she came in on. She had been riding her at least once a week to Barton House, but with winter getting colder, travel by portal was going to have to suffice. The mare seemed content to relax in her ample box, bedded deep with sand and straw. Rhiannon brought treats of apples and carrots, which Sunny consumed with gusto, then soaked up the attention of a good brushing. Ree finished by combing out the long mane and tail, then braiding them up to keep the tangles out. Inwardly, she laughed at what Alistar would think about the mighty warrior mare that had carried her into battle against the warlock and the Draugr, the mare that now lounged in his barn with braids and ribbons. She wished he was there to see this. When she returned to the apartment, Reagan informed her that the second mistress had just arrived and was in the garden room. Ree hurried in to find Aelith sipping tea with the queen over a plate of sweet biscuits. Your Majesty, Aelith, is everything okay? What brings you to the keep? Rhiannon, happy solstice. Yes, everything's fine. No dire news. I'm just here to check on the healer's progress in your office and to see if it's time to rotate in a new batch of novices. She stood and hugged Rhiannon. She looked around at the pile of paper decorations. What are these for? Are you having some kind of party? Ree blushed. It's nothing. I was just going to decorate a bit. Tonight's a holiday. Back in my world, that meant a lot to me. I know it's silly, but I want to hold on to a little bit of my world, at least for a while. I promise I'll clean it up and won't make a mess for the staff. I didn't think anybody would care. The queen stood, walked over and hugged Rhiannon. My dear, tell us about this holiday. Would you allow us to celebrate with you? I know it's hard not being home, but tell us about these decorations. What more do you need? Rhiannon glanced back and forth between the two. They genuinely wanted to be included. A slow smile crept across her face. Well, you'll have to bring me one of your socks. Cook prepared a simple dinner of sandwiches and fruit, then stayed to enjoy the festivities. The Queen and Aelith arrived as the sun set. Reagan and Sarah had been asked to join them, and even Seal and Azul came, curious about this new tradition. After the casual meal, hot cider and cookies appeared. Rhiannon then began to explain. So I enjoyed your solstice celebration. I hope you can gain a little joy from one of my old holidays. Christmas is celebrated on the 25th of December, which usually works out to be 4 days after the solstice. I've always loved Christmas and what it stands for. My mom and I would decorate a tree every year and then leave it up past New Year's. Some people would leave it up for 12 days. In fact, there's a song about the 12 days of Christmas, which is pretty funny. Aelith asked, but what is this holiday about? Why a tree? Well, Christmas is an old holiday celebrating the birth of a baby, Jesus. He was considered to be Christ, the Son of God, given to us as a present from God to save us from our sins. His mother, Mary, was a virgin, and she and her husband had to travel to be counted in a census. I know this is getting complicated. Anyway, she was very pregnant, eventually on the trip gave birth in a stable. And angels came and sang, and shepherds came from the fields, and there were 3 wise men that they came to and offered gifts. The tree decorating came later, but it was just part of the traditions that have been added by different countries. We celebrate Christmas all over the world. It's gotten a bit out of hand, though. Many have lost the reason for the season and just spend money to look good. Mom and I always kept it simple. We hung our stockings up by the fireplace and put gifts in them for the next morning. We tell our kids Santa Claus brings presents until they're old enough to understand the real reason for Christmas. Santa rides a sleigh around the world, pulled by 8 flying reindeer, slips down the chimney, delivers presents, and then on Christmas morning, when you open the gifts, Rhiannon stopped to catch her breath. Everyone in the room simply stared at her. confusion painted on their faces. She shrugged. It really didn't matter. Okay, I think I just lost y'all. How about we just decorate a little, hang our socks up by the fireplace, eat cookies, and sing some songs? The paper chains were strung from wall to wall across the garden room. Reagan moved the tree to the center of the room. Little paper stars were hung by loops of thread, and the paper angel served its purpose as the tree topper. Ree started singing. Deck the halls with boughs of holly, fa la 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 la. 'Tis the season to be jolly, fa la 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 la. By the time she'd gotten to the third verse, everyone was chiming in on the chorus and laughing. She then taught them "We Wish You a Merry Christmas" and tried to sing the 12 Days of Christmas. However, they laughed so hard at the thought of the geese, the leaping lords, and the swans, she just finally gave up. Reagan and Sarah excused themselves from the festivities, begging the lateness of the hour. The Queen and Ayla slipped off as well. Ree asked Cook for a favor of oranges for the stockings and some candied nuts. She wrapped the nuts in twists of paper, tucking one into each stocking. This was not so much about the present as the tradition. After Cook left, Rhiannon sat down with pen and paper. She wrote a quick note to each one of her new family, for indeed these people in her life were her new family. She thanked them for taking care of her, for giving her a role and purpose in her new life, and expressed her gratitude for their kind attention. She folded the notes and tucked them into individual stockings. Next year, she would plan better. Maybe next year, Alistar would have a stocking here as well. As midnight drew nigh, Rhiannon took a slender taper and walked down to the chapel. Seal trailed behind her, curious why she was going there so late. She sat in her usual spot in the closest pew and contemplated, why did she like Christmas? It boiled down to the familiar traditions, the comforting words, the songs, and yes, the memories with her mom. They used to attend midnight candlelight service every year. In her mind, she ran through some of her favorite songs. Angels We Have Heard on High, Joy to the World, and parts of the Messiah she could remember. I really need to write these words down before I forget them. At last she knelt and prayed for the end of the war, for the safe return of the brave souls out there in the cold and mud, protecting everyone back home. She asked for the Queen to be healthy and the kingdom to weather this storm. She prayed for Alistar, even though they were fated to never be together, and she wished him to be home, healthy and happy, and that he would be honest and declare his intentions to Aelith, his beloved. She rose and took her candle to the eternal flame burning on the altar. She bowed, then lit her candle and returned to her row. Quietly she began to sing, Silent Night, Holy Night. Tears ran down her cheeks as she finished the last verse. Her pendant warmed and the sapphire emitted a soft glow. She sent a silent prayer to the shield pendant worn by Alistar, trying to share that moment, sending love and protection to him. She blew out her candle, then rose to leave. She turned around to find the Queen was standing there, standing right behind her. Margaret opened her arms and embraced her, sharing the moment of deep spiritual belief. The moment passed and they walked back to their apartments for a night of restful sleep. As arranged, all returned the next morning to find Santa Claus had visited during the night and filled the stockings with goodies. Surprised, Ree saw one of her own stockings hanging up as well. She also had been gifted an orange, courtesy of Cook, and found a small box with a note. The box had a silver ring just big enough to fit on her pinky finger. The note was not signed, but said, "From one friend to another." Rhiannon looked up to see the Queen smiling at her and whispered, "Thank you." Cook brought out beignets for everyone with chicory tea and plenty of cream and honey. After a leisurely breakfast, Rhiannon and Aelith went off to the healer's office to discuss the novices. Seal stayed behind and sat in front of the Queen. "Your Majesty, thank you for making this day special for Rhiannon. You have lifted her spirits immensely. She has brightened my life more than anyone can realize. It was the least we could do. I just hope she and Alistar will work things out. I thought that this visit went well, albeit brief. Has she confided in you at all? I tried to give her the opportunity after the prince left. She is resolute in her refusal to discuss anything related to the prince. What I feel when they are together is great love, but she holds back for some reason." "My thoughts exactly, Katzen. Well, we are here for her when she decides to confide in us. Sighing, she stood and bid the staff a Merry Christmas, then went back to the never-ending demands on her time. And that is from The Chosen Unleashed.
Good story.
Glad you liked it.
Can you say more about the Katzen?
The Katzen were actually engineered is not the right word, but they were bred with magical intent by Agrona. She took wild cats and imbued them with intelligence because they were going to be her new super weapon against the kingdom. Unfortunately, she did not account for the fact that cats tend to be a bit independent, and they did not agree with her. So they rebelled against her, and she locked them in the bottom of a castle in the dungeon to just get rid of them. Let them die. Let them be gone. And they survived barely, licking the water from the walls and eating mice and insects until they were rescued by some of the practitioners in Brindir. They pledged eternal service to Brindir, and they work with the healers to help them in their healing profession. And they're big cats. Big.
That's cool.
Where can people buy your books, Emerald?
They're on Amazon. They are on Kindle Unlimited. They are ebooks. They are paperbacks. And hopefully in about 2 or 3 weeks, I'll have an audio book out on the first book. And I will tell you that narrator is so much better than I am.
Yeah, professionals do wonders, don't they?
Yeah.
All right. Well, our next reader is going to be Robert. He is in a writing group with me, Moorhead Friends Writing Group. He also joins us every Monday. Well, not every Monday, but occasionally on Monday when we all get together and write. So, Robert, why don't you tell us a little bit about the story that you're going to read, and I'll let you take it away.
Okay. Well, the story is going to be an excerpt from my novel that'll be ready on January 1st. It's called Mortal.exe. And essentially the elevator pitch I use is the daughter of Hades and Persephone goes to college. So in that, doing that, she's of course made a few friends. One of the friends is Sarah, her bestie, who has invited her home in the excerpt I'm going to read for their Thanksgiving Day celebration, Dia de Gracias. So that's pretty much where I'm going to pick up. If you have more questions, I can, of course, answer them afterwards or however. So with that in mind, here we go. Mel took the shouted admonition to heart, getting in and out of the shower quickly. She did what she needed in the bathroom and got out. On the other hand, Sarah seemed to like pushing limits. She took her time in the shower and with her use of the bathroom. Mel was dressed and in the kitchen helping with the eggs, which Rita insisted no one could mess up. By the time Sarah left the bathroom, as predicted, there was a line for the shower, since 3 cousins had stopped by and plenty of shouting for Sarah to hurry up, followed by complaints about the cold water. Rita muttered in Spanish to Mel, "Do you think your parents would agree to swapping daughters?" "They might, but I think you'd just be swapping problems." "That's the way of things, isn't it?" Rita said. "Your parents don't approve of the things you do?" "More like they don't understand what I'm doing or why I'm doing it. In the end, I just want to be Mel, and they want me to be Melanticos." She gave a slight shrug. "I guess that doesn't make any sense." Sarah joined them at that point, and conversation turned to dicing potatoes, tending eggs, and discussions of other tasks needed to feed 10 people. About the time the cooking was done, the bustle of too many people in a small space wanting to be fed began. Mel was overall made to feel part of everything. This was an exceptional experience for someone who'd only lived with her parents and a few old tutors. As she excitedly bounced around the kitchen, Sarah's younger brother spoke up. Sarah, you didn't tell us that your roommate was hot, he said in Spanish, clearly not expecting Mel to understand. Everyone laughed except Mel and Rita. Mel tried to find a place to hide. Rita scowled fiercely at her son. Why don't you ask Mel something in Spanish? Rita's tone cut through her laughter like a whip. Everyone but Sarah sobered, making the situation worse by looking at her. You can speak Spanish, don't you? The young man asked Mel. Yes, and I can speak it fairly well. Mel shrunk from all the eyes in the room staring at her. Sarah burst back into laughter and pointed at her brother. Mia, Rita said more forcefully this time. Only when her daughter quieted did she turn to her son. Is there something you want to say to Mel? The boy grimaced, but then smoothed his expression. I'm sorry, Mel. I didn't mean to embarrass you. Mel mustered a smile and straightened. It's all right. I wish you'd phrased it differently, but thank you for the compliment. Don't thank the rascal. He'll just get the idea that it's what he did is okay. He shouldn't be speaking about women like that. Nor should he assume that someone can't speak Spanish. And Sarah, I should make you apologize to your brother, but I don't think you'd mean a word of it. Sarah sputtered under the baleful gaze of her mother, but didn't say a word. It was her father, John, that her eyes darted to. His stern, flat-faced look illuminated any possibility of defense. We'll talk about manners later, Daniel, John said, directing his anger at his now cowering son. He turned to Rita, his expression softening. Are we about ready to go? If breakfast is done, it's just a matter of getting everyone ready and everything we're taking loaded into the cars. Then I'd suggest everyone should eat. Let's get moving. There's a party to get to, after all. His tone and expression changed from gruff and glaring to bright and cheerful. A deafening cheer went up from everyone, and the general mayhem of a large family returned. In due course, people split off to finish getting ready for the celebration. The ladies lingered to help Rita square away the dishes. Then Sarah dragged Mel back to her room. Time to get ready, so change into your party clothes and put on your makeup. Probably should do it quickly, too. Mel looked at her in confusion for a second until she realized what Sarah meant. She lugged out her suitcase and found the crop top and tight jeans. Holding the top up, she asked, should I really wear this? I mean, you complain about my bikini, but this will have my boobs hanging out almost as much. Oh, and I don't wear makeup, so that part's easy. Yes, I'm sure you should wear that. Sarah stripped down to her skin and put on a similar pair of tight jeans and midriff-bearing, cleavage-showing yellow crop tops. And we need to fix that about you and makeup. You're pretty enough to get away without it, but there are times it's nice to be a little extra, especially when it's unexpected. Mel shrugged and began putting on her clothes. If you say so, I say so, Sarah said, sounding like her mother. You'll see, and I'll teach you. In fact, come watch while I put on mine. Mel finished dressing and did as instructed. She listened to Sarah's instructions about using makeup. She even found a room to ask a few questions. Despite the admonition to hurry, it took them about an hour to get ready. Before heading out, Mel looked at herself in the mirror and at the back of the door. She turned this way and that. She wasn't as thin as she'd been a year ago. She also wasn't ghostly pale. Such things weren't all that she noticed, though, and her insecurity came out again. You know your brother's going to be encouraged to comment on my looks even more with me dressed like this. Sarah placed her hands on Mel's arms and rested her chin on her friend's shoulder. He might think it, but after what Mom and Dad said, he won't dare say a thing. Not where anyone could hear, anyway. Mel leaned against her. Well, anyone else, though? Probably not, because news that you know Spanish will spread, so nobody will make that mistake again. They're not likely to want to embarrass you. They'll want you to dance with them after all. Sarah grinned into the mirror at Mel. Be ready to dance your legs off, though. You are hot, and you look like fire. Guys are going to want to get close to you. Not going to happen. I have a boyfriend, Mel said, pulling back from Sarah to sharply make her point. He's not here. Besides, it's not like you're going to go home with anyone but me. or find any dark corners, right? Right. Mel spoke with conviction, but she looked a little dubious. Sarah kissed the base of Mel's neck, then straightened. Well, since we're ready, let's go. Oh, and we have to get you some heels or boots. Those sandals look nice, but there are times you should strut. Bedlam reigned outside the door. Mel couldn't help thinking chaos her great-great-grandfather would have been pleased. People were zipping past. Calls were made for someone or another to hurry up in the bathroom. How had Mel missed all these going on outside the door? She followed Sarah into the mayhem and to the kitchen, an island of calm in the storm. Good, you two are ready at least, said a harried-looking Rita. Would you two mind starting to load the... She saw Sarah picking up trays of food. Thank you. Sarah walked over to a load of trays and kissed her mother on the cheek. I remember how it is, Mom. She turned to Mel. Load up. We'll start putting things in my car. Once outside, Sarah said, it's good to get out of that, even if it is just for a little bit. She wasted no time getting trays settled in her car and headed back for more. With the second trip, the back of Sarah's car was full. Inside, things were settling down as people finished their personal preparations. John's voice cut through the remaining noise. We're leaving in 5 minutes, whether you're ready or not. And as promised, 5 minutes later, he announced he was leaving. And everyone scrambled. Everyone except Sarah. And she held Mel back, though Mel did try. I know where we're going, so relax. Let the others get out of the way. Yeah, but your dad seems pretty insistent that we're all out of here. We're taking my car. I know the way. He'll get over it. Mel frowned at her friend, but followed her out once everyone else had gone. They were far enough behind that John gave them another stern look as they came out of the house. It made Mel nervous, but she couldn't understand his disapproval. Even if they were the last getting into the vehicle and the last to pull out the drive, they were still right behind the rest. The drive took 10 minutes. The venue was a nightclub. We're coming here? Mel shook her head in disbelief. Won't there be issues with minors attending such a location? Sarah laughed as she pulled into the parking space. Yes, here, and we'll have no trouble. One of my cousins owns the place. He lets us take it over for family events, so there's enough room for everyone. She jumped out of the car. Come on, let's get things inside. Mel looked around at the number of cars in the parking lot. If they belonged to family members, then Sarah's family was huge. Perhaps large enough to require a nightclub for a family party after all. She had to ask, though, all of these cars belong to your family? Yep, all family, or mostly anyway. There are probably a few friends of family mixed in too. It's going to be quite a crowd when everyone gets here. Sarah slapped the roof of the car to get Mel's attention. Come on, snap out of it. We have to get everything inside. We loaded it ourselves. Couldn't we find some help to unload it? Mel ducked in on her side of the car to gather some of the trays and containers. When she straightened up, both Sarah's younger brothers were there with wide smiles. Before Mel could protest, she found herself unburdened. We can take care of these, Mel, Daniel told her. Sarah snorted. Nobody came to help me. Neither brother moved to help her. Well, my hands are free now, so I will, Mel said. She didn't even look at the brothers as she made her way around the car. She took a few things Sarah handed to her and stepped back. Lead the way. The boys were already reached the door to the club. Inside, Sarah turned to Mel and said, Thank you for the help, but you realize they were just there to look at your ass and chest while you were stooped over, right? She spoke in a tone of voice that wouldn't carry across the room. I know, but there's no help for that. Thanks to your insistence on this outfit, I've kind of got both on display. Mel's eyes sparked with mischief. Maybe we'll have to invite them to the beach next summer. You are incorrigible about the strangest things. You complain about what you're wearing now, blush at the mere mention of getting laid, but flippantly talk about inviting my brothers to stare at your bare ass on the beach. What would Chris say to that? Mel shrugged. Have to invite him too. I should have just let you bring that bikini and let you lounge around in it. Mel followed Sarah through the door and noticed the noise for the first time. A band was warming up on stage and a DJ blasted bachata. Colorful strips of paper hung from the ceiling and rainbow-hued constructions, stars, donkeys, and the like, hung among the streamers. Tables lined the walls to clear most of the enormous room for dancing, and people were already dancing, despite the overlapping sounds from the DJ and the band. Along the edges of the open space, people were gathered into knots, laughing and talking. Mel just stood, gawking at everything until Sarah nudged her and walked toward the array of tables already laden with food. Mel spent a few more seconds looking around before she followed. As soon as Mel put down her platter and tubs, Sarah swept her way to dance. First dance is mine. Mel was startled, so she stumbled a bit. The problem was that she was unfamiliar with the music. She fumbled around for a bit longer before finding the beat. Sarah's smile widened. Yay, you can dance. I was worried there for a minute. I told you, I'm Greek. We love to dance. I just had to get used to the music. You'll have plenty of time to do that. Not that you aren't already doing great. The ladies danced and laughed through the next song. As the second song died, Daniel cut in. Sarah protested, but her brother ignored her. Short of causing a scene, there was no countering his insistence, so she finally wandered away. Mel danced for the next hour. Partners changed, most of whom she didn't even know, and in the end, she had to wave off a new partner to go find something to drink. She tried to find Sarah, but there were too many people, so she found a seat against the wall and allowed herself to rest for a few minutes. As soon as she put her empty cup down, men were once again asking her to dance. At first, she smiled at their requests and shook her head. The invitations kept coming, and eventually she allowed herself to be drawn back into the mass of dancing bodies. Sarah finally found Mel and cut in on her current partner almost as curtly as her brother had cut in on her. Don't overdo it, Sarah shouted over the din. We'll be here all night. Have you eaten anything? I've had something to drink, but not to eat, no, Mel laughed. Honestly, I haven't thought about it. This has been too much fun, and I've not been allowed much time to think about things. Thank you, Sarah, for inviting me. I'd have been sitting at home alone and moping if you hadn't. You're welcome, Sarah beamed. We're friends. Friends look out for each other. Grabbing Mel's arm, she tugged her through the crowd to the tables where food were spread out. Come on, we can't have you passing out. Besides, the food is one of the best things about the party. Once they had plates piled high, they found two empty seats at a table. Their full plates ensured they wouldn't be bombarded by requests to dance. So you really are glad you came? Sarah asked the question between bites. Yes, this has already been the most fun I've had in quite some time. Good. Though I might have to chat with Chris if that's true. She took another bite. I'm really glad you came too. That you're happy means no one's gotten too antsy, I'm guessing. What do you mean? I mean, it seems they're trying to dance my legs off, but it's been great. She smiled. Her smile popped back. Good thing I've got good stamina. Well, you are rather obviously not a member of the family, so that's likely got something to do with it. Your popularity is likely going to continue. I mean, how much fun can you have with family? You can't flirt with them after all. Guess my pale ass does kind of stick out. Sarah gave her a nudge. You're not as pale as when I first met you. It's all okay as long as no one gets too pushy. You let me know if that happens. I'll set an ass straight right away. Her expression softened as she shrugged. Honestly, there are enough friends and family here it shouldn't matter, but you do stick out a little. You keep circling or echo around to that, Mel said. They finished eating and cleared their mess. It was like a signal flare had gone off. Men swarmed in to ask if they'd like to dance. Both ladies refused, but it was hard to keep saying no. They finally accepted the invitation of two young men, obviously brothers, and were swept back into the swirling, swaying mass. With few pauses, the hours passed in a whirl of dance. Mel went from partner to partner, or even just danced by herself, though that never lasted for too long. The music changed styles, and the band took over playing from the DJ. 3 hours had passed since when Sarah rushed up to her. You weren't kidding, she said, her voice shrill with excitement. She tugged Mel toward the door where a disturbance was spreading. A strange hush had fallen across the crowd, and people were stopping where they were. A distracted Mel tried to get Sarah to slow down as she bulled her way through the crowd. Kidding? What are you talking about? Yaya D is here. Oh, and I'm sorry I doubted you, but it was just so outlandish. Sarah, what was too outlandish? I mean, I figured Yaya might stop by, but why would everyone be stopping for her? Phaedra is here with her. Sarah came to a halt, facing Mel. Her words rang out through a suddenly quiet building. Mel looked around and realized Aphrodite's assumed name was everywhere. People were pressing in, moving toward the door to get a glimpse. Where's my niece? The words cut through the low murmur of the crowd. See? Sarah broke out in a smile and tugged Mel again. A path opened up in front of them. Mel resisted Sarah's insistence. She wanted to sink into the floor when all eyes turned toward her. It was too late for that, though. 4 figures stood at the door. Only one mattered, though. Only one was the focus of every eye in the vicinity. She was every man's, every woman's, every god's desire. Aphrodite wore a form-fitting dress of sheer silver that flashed with the sparkle of diamonds. A gleaming tiara rested on her head. She looked stunning, and she was quite simply there. She was the center of the world, and even 3 other goddesses existed only in her shadow. She smiled, and people gasped. There she is, Aphrodite said, holding out her arms to Mel. Mel pasted a smile on her face and rushed into her arms. Phaedra, you're looking more beautiful than the last time I saw you. When the embrace ended, Aphrodite gave her a faint smile. The compliment was simply her due, after all. Well, it has been 2 years. That's far too long, and part of why I'm here. You've been a naughty young lady, not visiting your aunt. Mel's cheeks went pink, and she averted her gaze. Grandfather made it clear I was unwelcome. Be that as it may, there are ways for you to visit family without intruding on the old blowhard's territory. Aphrodite looked about the room. Who are these wonderful people you found to replace me with? No one could ever replace you in my heart, Phaedra, Mel told her. They're friends, and my friends and family of my best friend here. She grabbed Sarah's arm and pulled her forward. This is Sarah, my bestie. Ah, so you're Sarah. Dee has told me a lot about you. Me? Sarah squeaked, looking like she might split wide open. I hope she's told you good things. Aphrodite ran a finger along Sarah's cheek. Only the best, dear. You have nothing to worry about. Sarah smiled at Demeter with adoration in her eyes. Demeter smiled back and swept her into a tight hug. Artemis was there, dazzled in the long silver hair hanging loose down her back. She too wore a silver dress, sparkling with diamonds. Where Aphrodite's fit her like a second skin, the dress Artemis wore fit loosely and flowed around her. She smiled back when Mel's eyes met hers. Athena, with her dark hair and eyes, had an etched beauty that was haughtier than Aphrodite's, stood beside her rigidly erect. She dressed more functionally than Aphrodite or Artemis, in a loose gray blouse and black divided skirt. When her gaze met Mel's, her hard demeanor softened slightly, and she offered Mel a nod. No one's attention could stray long from Aphrodite, though, and Mel turned back to look at her. The goddess stood there, tapping her foot and giving Mel a hard stare. Not that I'm not happy to see you and all, but what are you doing here? Is something wrong? Mel asked. Aphrodite waved a hand as if there wasn't a care in the world. We came looking for you, but I thought this was a party. I don't hear any music, though. She started for the stage with a slow, hip-swaying walk. The crowd of people opened up in front of her and closed in behind. Sarah fell in with those following Aphrodite. Mel started to follow too, but Athena grabbed her arm. We need to speak with you, Melontikos. Mel stopped, but still looked towards Aphrodite's departure. She watched as she ascended the stage before her attention was snatched back by the tightening of Athena's hand on her arm. What's she going to do? Mel asked. What we asked her to do. Sing, dance, distract the mortals so we can talk. The band struck up an opening chord, and Aphrodite's crystal clear voice joined in singing some sultry Spanish song. A deafening cheer rose from the crowd. She was everything desirable to everyone, so of course she could sing their songs in their own language. Demeter shook her head when Mel opened her mouth. Listen for now, Melanticos. Mel looked at the three stone-faced women staring back at her. She nodded sharply. Athena released her arm with a satisfied grunt. The sound of the crowd, band, and Aphrodite's singing faded into the background mumble. We are here to warn you, Melanticos, Demeter continued. Zeus wants you back in the fold badly enough that he's willing to break you if that's what it takes. Mel wrinkled her nose. I know he wants me to be his next broodmare. Artemis cut her off with a sharp gesture. Just listen, girl. He aims to destroy your life here, and he's watchful enough that we won't be able to actively help you anymore. Mel straightened, bristling at being called a girl. What do you mean? How have any of you helped me? You're showing a lack of situational awareness, Athena said. Didn't you think it strange that your friend heard Zeus and came to your aid? Don't you think he, the Lord of the gods, would have set you apart so he wouldn't be disturbed by mere mortals? Artemis joined in. Then there was your resolve. How many of Zeus's sweet words ensnared, yet you resisted? Her disapproval collapsed into a worried frown. You did well until the end, which is why we didn't intervene more directly. Demeter looked at Mel with sadness in her eyes. Now, though, none of us will be able to help, even indirectly. I would protect you if I could, but he is acting through too many agents, and none of us can directly oppose him. Calliope, Clio, and Melopomene have volunteered to alienate you from the people you work with, Demeter said. They're muses, so there's little chance they won't succeed in inspiring the mortals in the direction they wish them to go. Her shoulders slumped, making her look sadder and smaller than her grandmotherly guise already did. Artemis broke the silence. You must leave your boyfriend if you care for him. Mel jerked as if stabbed. Chris, what has he done? He's harmless. He's done nothing to attract anyone's attention. No one other than yours, Artemis drew herself up and snapped. And he is not harmless. He is a positive threat to your maidenhood. Don't deny it. I sent my dude to warn you away just the other night. But nothing happened, Mel said, despite the warning. No, but you considered otherwise, and there's always the chance that it'll happen as long as this Chris is in the picture. Athena was back in her haughty demeanor, and her words cracked. Zeus will have none of that. He'll kill the boy and think nothing of it. He's only a mortal after all. Mel's shoulders straightened. If Zeus is so interested in my virginity, maybe I'll just remove that from consideration. There should be someone here that would be willing to take care of that for me. Fire filled her eyes and her mouth drew into a thin line. Do you hate the boy so much after all? Do you think Zeus wouldn't strike at him and the other you chose? Do you want both to die in horrible pain? Demeter glowered as she fired the questions at Mel. What? No, I actually care a great deal for Chris. Her shoulders slumped in defeat. If I stay with him, Zeus will kill him because he might take my virginity. If I actually let him take it, he'll die horribly. If I let someone else take it, they'll both die horribly. She paused, her eyes downcast. I can't win, can I? Athena full-arm slapped her, rocking Mel to the side. Mel balled up her fists and crouched, ready to lunge at the goddess of wisdom and war. Good. There's fight in you after all. What talk is this? You're claiming defeat before the battle is even joined. That said, you certainly won't defeat Zeus if you go charging in like Ares, bullying your way through. Think about things. Show a little guile. Rubbing her stinging cheek, Mel glared at Athena. Well, there sure doesn't seem to be a way out of this where I don't give Zeus what he wants. It's not as if I'm even a goddess, so I'm open to suggestions. Athena looked at her without concern. All three of the goddesses gave her bland looks. Artemis finally spoke. When the quarry is brought to bay, it will sometimes pretend to give up to lure the hunter in range of its hooves and antlers. Sometimes, when facing a superior foe and you hold poor ground and resources, it's necessary to withdraw from the field so that you can choose better circumstances for the fight, Athena said. Posh, Demeter exclaimed. Give Zeus some of what he wants. Cut ties with your lovely boy. Let Zeus appear to cut you off from your work and friends there. While he's gloating in triumph, quietly go about what you want to do until you're ready to confront him. Or perhaps he'll forget his purpose and direct his attention elsewhere. Mel nodded, but her expression alternated between defeat and frustration. What about Sarah? I should likely distance myself from her, too, if Zeus is gunning for all my friends in contact. Demeter shook her head. That would be too suspicious. She isn't viewed as a threat. Besides, that one is mulishly stubborn. She would see through any such subterfuge and try to stay even closer to you. Demeter finally smiled. Such a clever girl. I'm afraid we've kept our place apart for as long as we dare, Athena said. We should join in the festivities before we start to stand out, even with Aphrodite holding everyone's attention. The noise and motion of the crowd came crashing down on them. Still, Mel felt separated and distanced from the joy of the occasion now. It was hard to quell her frustration and anxiety over what she'd been told and thinking about what she must do now. She joined in the dancing, but she was distracted. Even Aphrodite calling her out to teach the gathering to dance the Karyotikos couldn't draw her out. 2 hours later, Aphrodite left the stage. She lingered a little longer to sign some autographs and take some pictures, including one with Mel and Sarah. Just before she left the building with the other goddesses, she swept Mel into another embrace. Goodbye, dear grandniece, she whispered in Mel's ear. She took Mel's face in her hands, and with her eyes boring into Mel's like augers, she said, It's fun to pretend, but remember, you're not one of them. She released Mel and was gone, leaving a pensive Mel staring after her. Sarah sidled up next to her. So, that was Aphrodite. Who are the other two with Yaya D? In her fugue, Mel replied without thought. That was Artemis and Athena. The words were out of her mouth before the alarm went off in her head. With mouth open and eyes wide, she turned to a triumphantly grinning Sarah. In her head, Mel heard her grandmother's words. Such a clever girl. And that's from chapter 11 of Mortal.exe. Had a little fun with that scene.
That was really well written. Really well written.
Thank you.
So so I know you're at university yourself. So what inspired you? Is that part of the inspiration of sending Mel? And what is she going for the same degree you have, or?
Actually, the inspiration for this story actually comes from a meme of all things. Oh, you've probably all seen it. Jason Momoa and Gal Gadot on one side of Amelia Clark, who's standing between them, all grins.
Yeah.
And the caption on the meme was, "This looks like a giddy college student trying to hide the fact that her parents are demigods of the underworld."
Oh, okay.
And so I took that idea and I ran with it. What is she there studying? Computer science. What do the other gods think about it? What are the other gods doing?
Yeah.
How is she keeping it secret what she is?
Yeah.
And that's the book.
And when's this one coming out?
It will be live on January 1st. So
ooh, pretty quick.
I've got my proof copy that I've got over there, but yeah, it'll be live on January 1st. And
very good.
Yeah, I figured what a way to start a new year. Just get it out there.
Right. Okay. Very good. All right. Well, next reader is actually me. So I will I'm going to be reading a short story that I wrote for an anthology, Tales from the Frozen North is what it's in. And it's about a fae shifter who can't make it snow near Christmas. So I will read a little blurb really quick. So Holly Frost has a problem. She can't make it snow in innocent Minnesota. As a descendant of Jack Frost, she should be natural. But something is very wrong. She needs help. So she goes to Sheriff Andy Finn. Andy Finn is a grouchy, not yet hibernating bear shifter. All he wants is for the snow to fly so he can get some sleep. But it's 40 degrees in December. When Holly Frost approaches him for help, he sets aside his dislike for the Frost family and does his job by taking her to a powerful elemental. Holly needs to get over her fear of failure, and Andy needs to change his misconceptions before they can create a winter wonderland. Innocent Minnesota, December 21st. Holly Frost was in trouble. She, of all people, should be able to make it snow. It was her job, though maybe it was more of a calling. Her current job was as a barista at Beartooth Tea and Coffee. As a descendant of King Jack, she should be able to conjure snow in her sleep. But after a week of trying, she had failed. Now the town would be in an uproar. Her alarm continued to sound off as she stared out the window of her cabin in disbelief. Why wasn't this working? Had some witch or powerful fae put a curse on her? Holly had 4 days to create the white fluffy stuff or some variation thereof. Snow, sleet, flakes, powder, grapple. Whatever name. She needed to get it on the ground. She would settle for a heavy hoarfrost at this point. Her first year making snow solo, and she couldn't make it happen. Grandpa Jack thought she was ready, but maybe she needed help after all. She wasn't about to let down the people, shifters, and fae of Innocent who depended on snow for their livelihood. Holly turned off the blaring alarm and started the coffee pot. She would call her mom and see if the Frost family could send reinforcements. She went to her closet and grabbed a pair of jeans, a t-shirt, and a sweatshirt that read "You, Innocent You," for the local university. By the time she was dressed, there was enough coffee in the pot for a cup. She poured some and called her mother. Her mother picked up on the second ring. "Holly, what's wrong?" "Why should anything be wrong?" Holly couldn't help the defensiveness that crept in her voice. "You only call when you need help." Her mother answered with the pragmatism Holly wished she had right now. Her nerves were frazzled. "I do need help." "What is it?" "The snow. I can't make it snow." "So Innocent is getting a little freezing rain. It's Yule. I'm sure you'll have snow by the end of the day." The confidence in her mother's voice was enough to make Holly think so, but she didn't dare risk it. "There's no freezing rain." Holly sat in one of the white wicker chairs. "Drizzle?" "Nope." Holly sank deeper into the red cushion. "A flurry." "Not even a frost," Holly confessed. "Not even—" "Holly, what are you saying?" The pragmatism had been replaced with panic. "My powers aren't working." "Aren't working? Why aren't they working?" "Mother, I wouldn't call you if I knew why." "Holly, you have to get snow on the ground." "That's why I'm calling you. Can you send help?" "No, I can't. Your brothers and sisters have their own towns. Your cousins, aunts, uncles, and even your father and I have been assigned to multiple storm fronts. We gave you Innocent Minnesota because, well," her mother stopped speaking. Erwin Frost was rarely speechless. "What?" Holly asked. "Well, we gave you Innocent because Mother Nature usually blankets the state of Minnesota all on her own. It normally doesn't require frost monitoring it." "You assign me to a town that doesn't need me?" Holly was too stunned to be hurt. Her mother sighed. "Well, normally there's already snow on the ground, so I'm a failure as a Frost." Holly experienced a sudden onset of nausea and sat down. "You're not a failure. You just need a little help. There are plenty of powerful fae and Innocent to help you." "There are?" "Yes, just check with the local authorities and perhaps they can help you with this problem." The local authorities, as in Sheriff Andy Finn, the bear shifter, avoided her at all costs. Well, it wasn't her fault he didn't like the Frost family. She needed help, as did Innocent. So he would just have to suck it up and deal with her. Sheriff Andy Finn watched as Trouble, a.k.a. Holly Frost, made her way towards him. What did the woman want? Why did she look as if she had him in her sights? All he wanted was to manage this town of shifters and humans and make sure everyone got along. Having the Fae parked in his backyard didn't help, and he didn't want to tangle with them any more than necessary. Andy had a job to do, and he did not need the distraction of Holly. It was bad enough he was still awake. As a bear shifter, he needed to hibernate, but his clock was off until the weather dropped below 32 degrees. It was nowhere near freezing, not even a frost, unless he counted the frost standing in front of him. "Sheriff," Holly sounded out of breath, "I need your help." "How may I help, Her Royalness?" He wasn't in the mood. "Well, you could skip the attitude." He cringed. It wasn't her fault. He was attracted to her and went on the defense whenever she was near. "Sorry, I'm not sleeping well." "Now, it's my turn to apologize. That is probably my fault." She couldn't know. Thoughts of her kept him awake. He imagined kissing her and wondered what she might taste like, what running his hands through her auburn tresses and staring into her maple brown eyes would be like. He frowned as he tried to quell the image in his mind. "I can see you're confused," she continued when he didn't speak. "I'm having problems making it snow." "Is that why it's so warm?" She nodded. Warm was relative, but temps in the 40s definitely qualified as warm in northern Minnesota this time of year. "Did you call in another frost?" He bristled at the thought of another one of her snobby cousins showing up. They had been assigned here before Holly took over last year. The last frost, Bianca, was the reason he avoided Holly. Bianca thought she was better than the shifters and humans who resided in Innocent. Bianca had been so caustic that the town elders requested a replacement in January. Holly showed up during the spring thaw. "I tried, but they're managing a storm front away from here." She looked down at her feet, tapping her tennis-covered shoes, penny-covered shoes. "Did you get the spell wrong?" he asked. "There's no spell." "How do you make it snow?" He was curious about frost magic. "It usually snows when I sleep." "While you sleep." "Yeah, I think about the type of snow I want, and when I dream, it snows." "Have you created snow before?" Figured the town sent away the great Bianca and the frost replaced her with a novice. "Yes, I'm not a complete incompetent." "Do you feel okay?" He couldn't keep from being concerned. "Yes, but..." She wouldn't meet his eyes, and her posture slumped. "What?" She peered up at him. "I'm not dreaming." "Of snow?" "Of anything." He slashed his hand through the hair. "Holly, you aren't making any sense." She said, "I'm sorry." "What do you need me to do?" The sooner it snowed, the sooner his deputy, the wolf shifter, could take over. "I need to meet with the elders." "Are you kidding me? Most of them are gone for Yule." Okay. I'll settle for Jamie Collins." "She's in Atlantis with her husband." "Are there any elementals here?" "Bridget Collins." A fire elemental? No wind or water fae?" "No, Chase Bridges transferred to Montana." Huh? Well, I'm wondering if that might be why it hasn't snowed." He shook his head. "You just said it wasn't snowing because you aren't dreaming." "That's true, but my mother said I was assigned here because it normally snows in Innocent without a frost." "Then why even assign one?" His patience was wearing thin. She threw up her hands. "I don't know. All I know is that snow is not happening and I need your help. Get in the squad car. We'll drive to the Fireside Inn and talk to Bridget. Maybe she can help." He walked towards his cars. Andy heard Holly's sigh as she fell in step behind him. After they were a few miles down the road, Holly debated for 2 seconds on confronting Andy about his issues. She decided if she had to live in this town for any length of time, they would need to get along. "So, do you not like me because Bianca broke up with you?" Tires squealed and slid as he stopped the car. "What?" Holly looked behind them. Phew, no one was on the road. "You heard me. Is your animosity towards me because of Bianca?" "How do you know about Bianca?" "Did she admit to dating a common bear?" he said. She rolled her eyes. "Please, I work at the Bear Tooth. There's more gossip there than Mabel's main salon." "Do you know why the great Bianca broke up with me?" Holly shook her head. She had no idea. Personally, she found Andy extremely attractive. Tall, dark, and handsome. Where was it? Tall, dark, and handsome. Even if she didn't already know, his personality alone was enough to indicate he was a grumpy old bear. Maybe his grumpiness and her cousin's ice queen facade didn't match. At our breakup, Bianca informed me Frost only mix with a pure-blood fae. His voice choked out. She said that? Holly thought that it was pretty rude of her cousin to tramp on poor Sheriff Andy with her unfound prejudice. Yeah, I'm surprised you don't share the sentiment. I'd have to put myself in the extinction list. What do you mean? Jack Frost isn't even pure fae. He's not? No, he's one of a kind, so it'd be impossible to find a mate like him. Actually, his first wife was human. First wife? Yeah, Jack has had 4 altogether. Bianca's great-grandmother was wife number 2 and a mermaid. Jack was married to her the longest. That branch believes they should keep the line pure and marry only wind and water fae. Not that it matters. So your great-grandmother was a mermaid. He swirled his finger around. La-di frickin' da. My great-great-grandmother was Jack's first wife. Bianca's older than me. She's like my grandparents' age. He stared at her and looked as if he might speak. A honk behind them stopped him. Instead, he started moving the car again. They sat in silence for the remainder of the trip. Holly learned that the Fireside Inn used to be called the hotel. Apparently, Bridget Collins' late husband found it humorous to have the only establishment of its kind at the time named the hotel. She shook her head at silly humans. Except for the fireplace burning in the lobby, the inn was as quiet as they entered. "I'm in the kitchen!" came a shout from the back. Holly was happy Andy had brought her here. She hadn't had a chance to meet the elder woman yet, and she felt the warmth of the holiday and hearth when they entered the kitchen. The smell of kroomkaka reminded her of home. "Hey, Mrs. Collins," Andy said. "I've told you before, Andy. You can call me Bridget." "Sorry, ma'am. That doesn't feel right. Seems disrespectful." Andy seated himself on a bar stool on the opposite side of the counter. Holly followed suit. "Fine, fine." The woman continued pulling pastries off the hot iron and rolling them nimbly into cones with her hands. She nodded at Holly. "And who is this?" "This is Holly Frost. She's needing a bit of guidance from you." Bridget finished her currant pastry roll and wiped her hands with her apron. "You're Jack's granddaughter." Great-great-great-granddaughter, Andy clarified. Mrs. Collins stared harder. "The human line?" Holly nodded. "Good. I was like that side of your family. We were happy that you were available to take on Innocent. Your grandfather, Johann, was here in the 1950s and a well-loved member of the community." "Thank you, ma'am. I'll let him know that you appreciated his time here. He doesn't work much anymore," Holly said with all sincerity. Bridget refilled a cup on the counter. "Coffee?" "Yes, please," and Andy answered. "No, thank you, ma'am." Holly didn't want coffee. She wanted to figure out why she was broken. Bridget passed a cup of coffee to Andy and leaned on the counter. "How can I help you?" "She can't make snow," Andy announced. "Perhaps she'd like to tell me?" Bridget shot him a dirty look. "Sorry." Andy hung his head and sipped his coffee. "He's right." Holly wasn't sure why she felt the need to defend Andy. "I've been having problems. My mother informed me that normally it snows here easily without a frost." Bridget seemed to be thinking, "Sometimes it does." "Is that because you have a balance of elementals?" Holly asked. "Yes," Bridget answered. "And now you're missing the Atlantean and a wind elemental?" "Actually, once you came on board, most of the elders took the holidays off. So you're actually missing some of the powerful fae as well." Holly turned to Andy. "Are there any fae on the city council?" Andy shook his head. "This council is made up of humans, and of those, I'm not aware of any who practice the craft." "I don't know how I'm going to make it snow. I don't understand. I've never had this problem before." Holly's head was heavy, so she settled it on her crossed arms on the counter. She wanted to cry. "You're unbalanced," said Bridget. Holly lifted her head. "I beg your pardon?" "You are out of balance. I can tell just by looking at you." Andy swiveled his seat in Holly's direction. "You can?" "Why wouldn't I? I'm stressed. Why wouldn't I be? I'm stressed beyond belief, and I have a crush," Bridget added before taking a sip of her cup. Andy leaned in and whispered in Holly's ear. "On who?" "None of your business." Holly sat up straight and pushed Andy away from her. Andy looked at Bridget. "I think she likes you," Bridget said matter-of-factly. The fire elemental was going to be the death of Holly. She was going to expire from embarrassment. "I think we need to go." Rather than wait for Andy, she just got up and walked out of the inn. "Go after her." You can't be certain she likes me. I believe she does, although I can't understand why you've been nothing but rude to her. I haven't. Andy, please. We've all seen how you treated her. She's not Bianca. Does everyone know about Bianca? Bridget shrugged. It's a small town. He didn't know what to say. Bridget was right. He had not been polite to Holly since she arrived. He had Deputy Wolf handle any calls out to her cabin. Whenever she showed up at work, he left Beartooth rather than interact with her. And yet, on the car ride over, Andy warmed to the knowledge that Holly wasn't a full-blooded fae. Could that mean she might be interested in a bear shifter? You're the reason it won't snow. Andy swung his head up. What? You avoid her and push her off on others. How do you think that makes her feel? Unbalanced? Among other things. I know. Do you? You act like an ass whenever she's around. What would it hurt to be nice to her? Nothing. Actually, given his newfound insights, it would be easier than Bridget thought. Then go after her. I will. He quickly followed Holly and ran into her outside. He couldn't resist teasing her. You like me. Doesn't really matter, does it? She turned away from him and walked towards her car. What do you mean? He asked. You're still hung up on Bianca, aren't you? No, why would you think that? Because she's tall, blonde, blue-eyed, and beautiful. I mean, I'm sure she broke your heart. My being here may remind you of her only because I'm a frost. He needed to shut her up, so he did the only logical thing. He kissed her. She tasted like nutmeg and smelled like a fresh forest. He tugged her hips close to him, her hands wrapped around his neck. A cool breeze caught in the air and smelled like snow. He pulled away from her. Did you do that? Her brown eyes blinked. Do what? The air. It just got colder. Yes, there was definitely a chill in it. As Holly stared up at him, a few snowflakes sprinkled her hair. The white reminded him of stars in a dark sky. It is colder. She stepped back. I wonder why that happened. Maybe you were finding your balance, he ventured. Maybe. You can take me home now. I have a better idea. Why don't you come to my cabin? I'll make you some dinner, we'll watch a movie, and take your mind off trying to make it snow. Are you just suggesting it will happen? What can it hurt? We won't be any worse off than we are now. No, I really need to get home and figure this out. They drove in silence back to her cabin. Holly was unsure what caused the scattering of snowflakes. Was it his kiss? She doubted it. Bridget Collins said she needed to find her balance. Andy's kiss had made her feel anything but. Her heart was racing and her insides were melting like spring snow. There was no way the man would help her balance her. Perhaps Mother Nature had finally taken pity on her and decided to help. The great mother's assistant seemed far more likely than Holly having created the temperature drop in a few flakes after having failed so miserably in the past month. When they stopped, Holly got out and had no idea where she was. This isn't my cabin. I know, it's mine, Andy said. What are we doing here? I asked you in the car if you minded stopping here for lunch before I take you back home. You said nothing, so I didn't think you cared one way or the other. He shrugged as if it was of no consequence. Sheriff, you kidnapped me. Kidnapped you? I did nothing of the sort. I told you I have to feed Whiskers. Whiskers? My cat. She giggled at the thought of such a large man owning a small animal of a cat. What? He stared at her. You. I can't imagine you with a small creature such as a cat. It was worse than she could resist, and the laughter came bubbling forth like a stream. I will have you know that Whiskers is a very masculine cat. I'm sure. She followed him into the house, trying to stifle her amusement. He is. His face soured at her. Once she was inside, her eyes leisurely explored his cabin. Like hers, it had knotty pine, but where his cabin was one level, she had a loft in her A-frame. She strolled through his kitchen, eyeing his porch and a living room before freezing in her tracks. A sandy-colored cat with familiar wisps on its ears, black bars on its forelegs, and a bobtail stopped Holly in her tracks. The thing must be 4 feet long. What is that? That is my cat, Andy replied, as if owning the beast was normal. She stared at the creature now stalking her as if she was lunch. That is not a house cat. It's a, what is it? Andy picked up the cat, who seemed dwarfed by this large man, by his large arms. Sometimes she forgot he was a bear shifter. Whiskers is a bobcat. A bobcat? You domesticated a bobcat? I didn't domesticate him. He's wild. Holly took a cautionary step backward. You aren't afraid of him, are you? No, why would I be afraid of a cat? I'll just go wait in the car. She almost reached the door. Whiskers chose that moment to leap between her and the door. He was definitely stalking her. The cat gave an intense stare as if sizing up its next meals. Holly stood straight and faced the animal. She took a gingerly step backward, bumping into Andy. I'm sorry, she froze when the animal grazed her calf, ready to wind around her legs. Whiskers wound figure eights around her legs, purring so loudly that the vibrations traveled across her limbs. I think he likes you, Andy said. Well, that's a relief, she said, dumbfounded. Let me feed him and then we can head back to your cabin. Holly had almost forgotten she'd raised a bit of snit earlier. Oh, no, that's fine. Take your time. He gave her a weird look. Okay, have a seat. Holly sat in a chair large enough for, well, a bear. She watched as said bear went to the cupboard. Andy pulled out a can of salmon and opened it. Once the sound of an opening can pierced the air, the cat no longer cared about Holly, for which she was immensely grateful. She watched in fascination as Andy forked the salmon onto a plate and placed it at a bar in the kitchen. Whiskers jumped up on a bar stool and proceeded to devour his food. Can I get you something? Andy asked. Holly's stomach chose that moment to grumble. The cat lifted its head and looked at her. She'd swear it even smiled. I guess I'm hungry, she admitted. You are a vegetarian? How'd you know? Did bears read minds? Most fairies are. I suppose that's true, except the water fairies. Some of them eat fish. I have some vegan mac and cheese from when Bianca and you dated. He nodded, but said nothing as he turned away and prepared their meal. There was something about watching a man cook that she found very sexy. Granted, it was just mac and cheese, but she'd never had anyone consider her feelings, let alone her basic needs. The last human she dated thought that the trip to Tito's Tacos qualified as a date. She stood. This is not a date! Andy turned and stared at her. What? Holly knew that she was turning all shades of red. She hadn't meant to announce her opinion. Luckily, she didn't need to respond. Look, I'm just making you lunch, which is done, by the way. Sure enough, Andy held 2 bowls of what looked to be delicious, and one was for her. She couldn't very well turn him down. Sorry. She plopped back down in the chair. Follow me. He walked out onto the porch where there was a table big enough to seat 12. There were some chairs lined along the wall, indicating that more could be seated if necessary. On the other side of the porch were 2 lounge chairs similar to those in the main cabin, and a small table fit for a fairy that looked like they were meant to be for a sidewalk cafe. Sorry. Andy sat at the table. Holly followed his lead. They ate their food in silence. He stared cautiously at her the whole time. What? She finally asked, after nearly licking the bowl clean as Whiskers had done earlier. Are you sure you have enough fae in you to make it snow? What do you mean? Then she looked at the chairs, the metal twisting like leaves and vines, the heaviness of it. These are wrought iron, aren't they? Yeah, Bianca couldn't sit on them. In hindsight, perhaps she shouldn't have mentioned Bianca's name. You know, Sheriff, I'm sick and tired of you getting in my face about being snotty Fae Frost one minute and not frickin' Fae enough the next. If I was unbalanced, which I'm not, you certainly aren't helping. She pointed her finger at him. His throat was thick with guilt. She didn't deserve his half-assed attempts at help. I'm sorry. I don't really understand much about Fae or magic or any of that stuff. Clearly, she huffed and crossed her arms. What can I do to help? Besides calling back all the Fae from vacation and telling them I'm a complete failure, she leaned back in the tiny chair and rested her chin on her chest. I'm not doing that because you aren't a failure. How can you say that? It's the first day of winter. She stood, threw her hands toward the windows. Does that look like winter to you? No, but you have time. I do not. Did you hear me? First day of winter. Yeah, but humans are more forgiving. They want to finish their holiday shopping and are content to wait until the 25th or better, the new year. Oh my goodness, if it doesn't snow by the new year, I will have to go into hibernation. She faced the window, but her head was down. And he wasn't sure what possessed him to rise from the chair, walk towards her, and wrap his arms around her small frame, but it appeared to him as if she could use a bit of his strength. Holly leaned back against him. I don't know how to fix this, Andy. She'd used his given name rather than her sheriff. He kissed the top of her head and whispered, Don't fix it. She turned in his arms. Don't fix it. How can you say that? You of all people can't go into hibernation cycle until the temperature dips below freezing. How do you know that? I grew up with bear shifters in Alaska. You did? Yeah, my cousins. He gripped her about the shoulders. Did you say cousins? Yeah, my mother's a bear shifter, although she's polar and they don't really hibernate. She ended on a squeak as he lifted her up and carried her to the living room sofa before settling her down next to him. Andy. There was his name on her lips. What are you doing? You're a bear shifter. No, I'm a frost. We don't shift. The frost blood is stronger than shifter? Yes, frost blood is stronger than shifter. She smiled at him. He couldn't resist. He gathered her into his arms snugly and dipped his head to capture her lips. Oh, goddess. Andy was kissing her again. Her balance shattered with his hunger. He moved his mouth over hers in slow, devouring kiss. His arrogance that she'd do nothing was maddening, and yet she found this soothing. How many times had she dreamed of being crushed in his embrace? How devastated she was when she'd find out Bianca had gotten to him first. Andy broke off the kiss. Holly, what's wrong? She barely managed an answer. Nothing. Do you always purse your lips into a thin line and frown when you kiss, or is it just me? No. It's not you. It's Bianca. Excuse me? He pulled away from her. I was just thinking how she got to you first. Are you jealous? He winked at her. No, it's just that she seems to ruin everything she touches, except for, of course, snow. He stood. So I'm ruined, damaged goods? No, don't get your fur all ruffled. I don't mean it that way that you think. If anything, she ruined me for you. He gestured between them. I don't follow it. Admit it, you don't like me because I was a frost. His head hung low. I thought you would be like her. That's what I mean. I guess I'm sort of thankful you aren't still hung up on her. Suddenly, he was kissing her again, crushing his lips against her, silencing her. She pushed back against him. Stop that! He leaned back, giving her a devastating smile. I don't know. It seems to be an effective method to keep you from spouting drivel. Holly agreed with her cousin. Her cousin was drivel, so she changed the subject to their current problem. What about the snow? Looked out the window. Seems to be managing itself out. Sure enough, there were a few sprinkles floating outside. Holly walked to the window for a closer look. It wasn't really snowing. The flakes were translucent, but they were coming down enough that perhaps it could qualify. Andy came to stand beside her. Perhaps you've been overthinking it and stressing myself out, she agreed. Do you have to get back to your cabin? Why? I thought perhaps we could have popcorn and watch movies. Oh, WOOF plays those holiday movies this time of year. Would he watch one of those small town holiday movies with her? He shrugged. Okay. Andy walked a few steps to the kitchen to make popcorn. Holly grabbed the remote off the coffee table, turned on the TV, and punched in 16.1 for the local station WOOF. One is already playing. Oh, this is a cute one. Santa's Snowbirds. Andy peeked from around the kitchen. Is that the one where the old couple leaves the small town every Christmas and the residents start to believe they're Mr. and Mrs. Claus? You've seen it? A man who watched Christmas movies? A few times. My mom likes those movies too. Hey, do you want hot chocolate? He hollered over the popping corn. Yes, please. Might as well ask her if she wanted a Matty Petty with massage. Once Holly settled in with her cup of hot chocolate and a bowl of popcorn between them, the air took on a chill and she shivered. You can lean in if you want. Andy lifted his arm and nodded to his side. She paused. It was tempting, but... Or there's an Afghan my mom made on that chair over there. Holly set down the popcorn and the hot chocolate and then picked up the throw. I'll curl up next to you if that's okay. He smiled wide. That's more than fine. And Holly spent the afternoon watching movies and sipping hot chocolate while curled in Andy's arms. Their fingers touched when they both reached for the popcorn. Andy made a game of kissing her when the heroine would kiss on the screen. He missed one, and she would say so, but she looked up and found him sleeping. Rather than wake him, she snuggled closer and listened to his rhythmic breathing before she too succumbed to sleep. Andy woke with a stiff neck. He went to stretch, but found his arm wouldn't move. It was wedged between the couch and Holly. He lifted it to curl the appendage around her shoulder. She stirred, and after a bit of struggling, finally opened her eyes. Andy? I'm here. What time is it? Holly rubbed her eyes. He glanced at his watch. Just after 8. She stood up. Oh, no, I better go. I don't think that's possible. He reached for her, but succeeded only in grabbing handfuls of hair. What do you mean? She frowned. Look outside, Frost. She rushed to the window. There must be 2.5 feet out there. He walked to her side. That would be my guess. Oh, no, I went from no snow to trapping people in their homes. No one is trapped, he wanted to reassure. The locals love snow. Now the bears can hibernate, the wolves can start up their dog sled business, the rinks can open. You did a good thing, Holly. The temptation was too much to resist, so he gave up and hugged her. She gave him a weak smile. I guess you can finally hibernate. I can, but I found I don't need to hibernate. You don't? No. I just needed a little frost, Andy said before dipping his head and capturing Holly's lip. She teeted, You aren't helping my balance. He swooped her into his arms. Don't worry, I'll catch you. Maybe that's all I needed, she replied. And that is Snow by Any Other Name. So that is available wherever you get your books. And if you want, it's actually, if you have Smashwords, it's free on Smashwords until the end of the month or whatever. So, all right. Let's see. Next up, I totally forgot to put my own banner up. That's what happens. Rachel is going to be our next guest. So, unless anyone has any questions about mine, let me go peek over here. Nothing. All right, good. Just lovely comments. Thank you. Our next person up is going to be Rachel Simpson. So I will. Rachel, if you want to unmute and tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're going to read, we'll roll right along here.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I just got to say, I so enjoyed that story. That was
Thank you.
So I'm going to be reading also a short story. It's Dragon's Calling, which is, I call it book 0.5 in my Legends of Hartura series. So it's the prequel. And it is available now. If you sign up for my newsletter, you can get it for free from my website, rachelsimpsonwrites.com. And you can find it at most ebook retailers as well if you prefer to read somewhere else. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and get started on it. To say a little bit about it. So this is about a young dragon who dreams of becoming a guardian. And the guardians in this world are the dragons who are stewards of magic of the land. And so it's her story because she wants to start training and she keeps getting told no, but no one will tell her why. And so we'll follow her journey. So we start with Elodin, who is an elemental. So like the drip, drip, drip of water creating cracks in his limestone, the visions had come. For a faint unease at first, then stronger. Rocks tumbling, trees crashing, the mountains falling, nipping at his awareness until they grew so fierce and undeniable they bowled over his senses like an avalanche. Now, Elodin paced the deep caves of the mountain, searching for the source of his distress. If he'd been mortal, made of flesh and bone, he'd be panting now, clutching at a chest where a heart raced from fear. But he was no mortal. He was elemental, one with the stone and yet aware of existence beyond its boundaries. His only heart, the heart of the mountain. Mutable in form, he stood as a creature of luminous smoke and glowered. An elemental? Afraid? What have I come to? First flame help us if even the stones fall to fear. He paused, tendrils of ether settling around him as he calmed himself. Awake, he could feel the thing behind the nightmare. He just couldn't find its source. There was a pricking, gnawing sensation of wrongness. The very stones trembled. He needed them to calm, needed to ease their pounding at his senses so that he could see what frightened them so. Moving to soothe them, he shifted form. Like 1,000 pinpricks of light, he flew through the mountain's core as though it were no more substantial than air. Brushing each layer of rock, Elodin shushed and soothed, but the stone would not ease. Stretching out his energies, he flowed into the upper layers where the rock slides and glaciers could change the face of the mountain, if not its heart. A sleepy note reverberated a question from the elemental of the high peaks, still resting in the deep silence of winter. He withdrew before his touch could spark true wakefulness. Let one of us rest. Next, he sank to the deepest layers of limestone. He felt for the telltale quivers, the quickening of hot rock waiting to burst forth and taste the air. He felt only deep acceptance, that eternal patience of the earth below him. No, that's not it either. He listened to the rock that was him and yet not him, flowing lengthwise through the stone. At each point, he found a quaking, fearful note in it. Then he felt it, a slight increase in tension wherever water flowed. The quavering of fear was so high-pitched he hadn't felt the difference at first. But checking again, there it was. He probed further, feeling for what about the water could bring such fear to the limestone. It eroded, that was usual, expected even. Water reshaped stone into stalagmites and stalactites. That was usually a peaceful partnership, a dance between the stability of stone and the perpetual movement of water. This fear was something new, something he had not felt before. He listened for a water elemental without much hope. As a rule, they did not speak to him, particularly not in early spring when they were full of their own journey and never in the same place long. Finding silence, he felt into the water as best an elemental of stone could do. But it seemed like it flowed as usual, frozen in parts, swelling in others, like it always did when the spring melt began. But everywhere he searched, snatches of nightmares echoed back. Mountains falling, stones grinding, the valley laid to waste. The deep patience of time had shaped him as it had shaped the mountains, and he recoiled at the scenes of destruction. Stone should never move so fast, whether it was just a nightmare or a vision of times to come, with the scenes of devastation so complete he could not, would not ignore it. He was the heart of the mountain. His duty was to preserve the foundation of his home. If he could not find the source of the pain and heal it, he must find someone who could. He sighed. I must go to the dragons. Quick-changing, short-lived, even born of the first flame, their nature chafed at him. How could such a creature come to have so outsized an influence on the turning of the world? He harumphed, and the rocks in the deep crevices rumbled in agreement. Dragons, meddlers. The last time a stone elemental had to ask the dragons for help had been 3 millennia back. He shuddered at the memory. The grandam of the current guardian had watched over the valley then. A lightning strike had set fire to an old dead tree. It had been a dry year, and the fire quickly spread through the tree's roots and into the heavy layer of loam wedged among the boulders. It burned for days. The elemental of that stone, a sandstone being who spoke with a voice like 1,000 skittering pebbles, had pleaded with the dragon to put out the blaze. Send rain, carry water, or redirect the brook, she had cried. Anything to stifle this heat. But the dragon had refused. Even when Eladin and the other elementals of stone had bound together and interceded on her behalf, the dragon would not budge. Some days later, a great boom rocked the valley as the sandstone ridge exploded. In the ripples of energy that followed, Eladin felt the shriek of water. Tiny droplets trapped within the stone had heated until they burst forth in a wild and desperate escape. The blast had reshaped the northern pass of the valley, and the lake there had drained out into the river because of it. He never saw the sandstone elemental again. He shook himself, trying to displace the horror of the memory, but the pervasive sense of unease remained. He had avoided dealing with the dragons, particularly as their valley's current guardian dragon, Moganhu, was as stoic and unfeeling as her grandam. As much as he needed a dragon's help, he did not trust her. Listening to the web of the valley's song, he paused. He did not feel the guardian's presence. He listened again. There was always a dragon in Fanayag. But no, his senses did not lie. There was no trace of her, for all that it was too early for the Dragon Council to meet. The guardian had left the valley. He smiled as the presence of another, familiar life form sang out across the web, and relief warmed him like sunshine on the southern slopes. There was only one dragon in the valley now, Abrent, the daughter of Moganhu. As a dragonette, she had been a tiny thing full of bright curiosity, her heart as full as any tree spirit in the first blooms of spring. He had often left his locust then to visit her nest and tell her tales of stone and the mountains and the movements of the earth. She would laugh and flap her tiny wings, eyes wide, and ask him for another story. He softened. He could not resent all dragons. For all that she had moved quickly, Abrent cared for the valley with a full heart, and she knew him. She was one dragon whose sensibilities he could trust. He began to pull in the great breadth of his being, specks of light coming together in a single luminous form. He ascended from the deep caves, passing through the layers of limestone to a rock outcrop midway up the mountain slope. Feeling the cool movement of open air upon him, he stepped off the rock to walk the land. He would go to Abrent and make her stop whatever threatened the mountain. He must, for if his visions came to pass, they were all in grave danger. Chapter 2. Abrent. Abrent stretched out upon the great rock, her favorite stargazing place. Her sapphire scales glinted in the pale moonlight as she breathed in the delicate melody of starshine. She was alone tonight. Her mother had flown across the mountains to join the Dragon Council. Unusual in early spring, as the dragons usually only gathered at midwinter when the land slept and their song was needed least. But as for so many things, Abrent's mother offered no explanation, and Abrent had long since learned not to ask. Her mother had assured her she would only be gone a few days, 3 at most. It was the first time Abrent had been trusted to stay alone, the sole dragon to watch over the valley. Though her heart had swelled with pride, it did little to salve the frustration she felt at not being permitted to begin her formal training. She wanted to become a guardian, like her mother and grandmother before her. She wanted to learn proper dragon magic, not just the basics she'd been practicing since she was old enough to leave the nest on her own. She sighed, staring up at the black night between the stars as though the answer would appear there. She had reached the age of eligibility 3 years ago when she turned her first decade. Logically, she knew that not all dragons started formal training that year. Still, she had asked, and her mother had merely stared into the distance, answering enigmatically that time is not yet ripe. Determined to become a true steward of the land's magic, Abrent had remained diligent in her studies at home. But, try as she might, the ongoing refusal, year after year, had begun to wear on her. So too did a lack of explanation. She had thought she was good with magic. She was slowly getting the hang of flying. But that had been the case from the beginning, and her mother hadn't told her anything enough that would help her improve enough to garner the yes she yearned for. Abrent blinked back a tear, the pinpricks of starlight watering in her vision. Her dreams were intact. It was her confidence that had taken a hit. Maybe some part of her was unfit, broken, or fundamentally flawed. What would they do? What would she do if they never let her become a guardian? Don't think about that. Abrent refocused on the starlight falling to the earth around her and breathed in the nourishment of the star's song. Born of earth, born of sky, Abrent hummed under her breath, picturing the fated lightning strike that had given rise to the first flame from which all dragons sprang. Like that lightning and the first flame, dragons melded earth and sky. Breathe the magic, so we rise, she finished the couplet. One with magic, she needed to feed upon the songs of the stars to nourish herself. She could sing the song of welcome each dawn and a lullaby of rest to the land at dusk in almost any shape. But should she be called on to do more for the valley, if there was any real trouble, she would need the full strength of the cosmos at her back. Born of earth, born of sky, she breathed in. Breathe the magic, so we rise, she breathed out. But try as she might to focus on the stars, her rebellious mind kept returning to the mystery of her mother's refusal. She sighed, letting the couplet go, and laid her head down on her outstretched forelegs. Other dragons had started training later. She desperately wanted to go, but she hadn't gotten up the courage to ask this year. She had told herself that she just wanted to give it time. It was just past the spring equinox, still early. Maybe she'd ask near her birthday, just a few moon cycles away. But here, in the dark of night, on her own with her own thoughts, she was uncomfortably aware that part of her didn't want to risk being turned down again. Trying to put the painful realization out of her mind, she rolled over. Extending her wings out flat to her sides, she let her underwings soak up the twinkling lights of the stars. Maybe she would sleep like this for her last nap of the night. She let her mind drift in the night's embrace, the hum of the cosmos lulling her senses until a thrumming, urgent vibration brought her to sudden wakefulness. She rolled to her feet, head questing from side to side as she tried to pinpoint the new sound. There. She turned to see a spindly figure, undulating like luminous smoke, step out from between the trees. She recognized him immediately and smiled. "Elladan," she said, "what brings you to the upper reaches at this hour? Have you come to enjoy the starshine with me?" "Abrent," he started, his form shifting from side to side in a way that seemed almost anxious. She had never seen him rattled. It unnerved her. Her whole life Elladan had been as steady as the mountains. She couldn't count the number of times he had counseled her to have patience, to be more like the stone of the earth. Seeing him like this made her skin prickle. An ominous cascade of clicks came as her spine scale stood on edge, echoed by the rapid crescendo of her heartbeat. She swallowed, trying to keep her voice level. "What's wrong, Elladan?" she asked. "I know you are young yet, Abrant, but you are our dragon." The moving wisps of his glowing form settled into a stern visage. "You must come and see. I think something is amiss in the waters that flow through my locus. The limestone quivers so. In the morning. You must come." Abrant frowned. She hadn't sensed anything off in the valley. Problems with water, though, that could be serious. They could destabilize the well-being of the plants and animals. The whole web could fall. She did not want to be responsible for that. She swallowed, claws gripping the rock with unease. Focus, she told herself, calling back her early lessons. Start with understanding what happened. "When did you first notice it?" Elladan paused, the tendrils of smoke flaring as he cocked what served as his head to the side. "I think it began slowly. I was not sure at first, but over the last few days I have felt it growing, stronger and stronger." "All right," said Abrant. "The dawn is coming soon, and I must greet it, for Mother won't be back by then. But after that, I'll come and investigate." "Thank you, Abrant," he said, bowing his head. "I hope you can help." His form wavered as though she were seeing him through a great wall of heat for an instant. Then he turned and headed back through the trees. She allowed herself to drop for a moment into the web of the valley's magic and felt the quavering in his being. Fear, like cold shivers down her spine. A knot twisted in her gut. She could be nervous. She was young, but Elladan was a rock spirit. He was ancient. What could scare him? And how could she possibly expect to fix it? Especially if she hadn't even felt it. She swallowed. With her mother gone journeying, the valley was her responsibility. Someday it would be hers entirely. Now she was on her own. This problem was hers to solve. She shivered. Wasn't this what she wanted to do? Of course, but I thought I'd have training before dealing with something so significant. What if I mess it all up and do more harm than good? I'd be worse than untrained then. I'd prove I wasn't fit and they'd never let me train to be a guardian. But she was the only dragon here. The problem was hers, no matter how ready she felt for it. "I will look," she whispered, more to herself now. Elladan's wavering light had already disappeared through the trees. In the blue haze of pre-dawn light, Abrant scrabbled up to the highest peak of Fanayag. Her breath whisked around her in frosted haze as she began the low hum that started the song of welcome. Closing her eyes, she let the familiar melody surge through her, body softening into the hope and joy of its crescendo. She had sung the song with her mother every morning since she'd been old enough to speak, and its cadence soothed her. As the notes rose and fell, pale pinks and oranges began to creep over the horizon, heralding the march of the sun. The song swelled, and she let herself lean fully into it, wings outstretched, voice trilling. The cascade of music anchored her in her sense of being. She was a dragon, and someday she would be a guardian of the land. Her heart filled as a liquid burst of sunshine poured over the pinnacles of the eastern mountains and spread to warm the valley floor. In the light of day, the fears of the night before seemed smaller, less potent. She could do this. Elladan had come to her for help, and help she would. Maybe if she fixed the problem, she might be finally allowed to begin her training. Abrant held on to that hope as she finished the last notes of the morning ritual. Breathing in the crisp spring air, she set out to investigate, scampering across the bridge line towards Elladan's side of the valley. Since water first entered the valley from the sky, through rain or snow, it seemed best to begin at the peaks above the tree line. Pausing, she surveyed the greenery of the valley floor. From the ridge, it looked so small it reminded her of a smooth carpet of moss. The river shone like quicksilver in the dawn light. She smiled. It seemed as beautiful and harmonious as ever. But if Elladan had felt a problem, surely she would find it. She bounced from rock to rock in the upper reaches and hummed in tune to the thrumming vibration of the land's own power. Her wings were just growing to the point where she could hold herself aloft for small periods. It would be many years until she would be able to leave the valley and fly across oceans like her mother. Today, that didn't bother her as much as it usually did. Today she had a mission. There would be time enough for flying afar in the years to come. The craggy, gray crest jutted into a clear blue sky as she neared the western pass. She focused her attention on finding any dissonant notes in the vast web of plants, animals, rocks, water, and soil, whose many voices wove into the valley's harmonic vibration. She stretched her wings to glide and then scampered again, pausing every few steps to hum and croon into the intertwined web of magic. With each call, she could feel the power in her voice resonate along the valley's connections. When the Fanayog's energy was healthy, the harmonic chords reflected back to her. She had shadowed her mother at work many times and knew how it would feel if the natural flow of power were amiss. If the dissonant notes would stand out as bold as rock slides on a still day. Thus far, the song of spring resonated, unaltered around her. The swelling chord of heavy rains and meltwater rose high over the rhythm of the thawing soil, and the whispered memories of waking plants. Soon the meltwater's chord would ebb, giving way to the many-layered melody of growth that heralded the summer months. Aberrant paused at the next great outcrop. She had made it halfway around the rim of the valley without detecting anything unusual, and was nearing Elodin's domain. I should be able to hear something of the problem. She cocked her head to listen closer, but she still heard nothing amiss. Maybe I'm too high up. Perhaps the issue will reveal itself where the water runs out from between the rock layers. Spreading her wings, she flapped them once, twice, preparing herself to glide down to the lower reaches of the valley. She aimed for the tree line, where the first stumpy firs stretched out their wizened arms towards the sun. The morning light had grown stronger, reflecting gold and blue off her scales. Feeling warm and giddy, she wiggled her tail, braced her wings, and leapt off the boulder into the free air. Catching the updraft from the valley's floor, she glided in a gentle spiral towards a small stretch of gravel just above the tree line. Closing her eyes, she luxuriated in the sensation of flight, stretching her spine from snout to tail as she dipped one wing in preparation for landing. Opening her eyes at the last moment, she balked. She had misjudged the distance. "Gah! Too close!" she squawked. The mountain was now rushing towards her, all at the wrong angle. Furiously, she beat her wings against the air in a desperate attempt to slow her descent. She managed to pull herself out of a crash, barely, and came to a skittering halt. Wings trembling, she watched as a shower of pebbles tumbled down the slope. She held her breath, praying to all her ancestors that this didn't set off a greater rock slide. That's all I need, to be called for help and trigger an avalanche of stone down the mountain? The shower of stones at last came to stillness, and Aberrant let out the breath she'd been holding. Her shoulders slumped in a mix of relief and disappointment. Her mother would never have landed so clumsily. She sighed. At least she hadn't triggered any disasters. That was just way too close for comfort. Shaking herself, she folded her wings on her back. With a few shuddering breaths, her heart still racing, steadied. Forcing her mind back to the task at hand, she surveyed the stately pines on this side of the valley. She decided on a deep note, one that she thought would resonate well with the old forest and the deeper stone of the lower mountain. She sang and felt the sound radiate out from her, opening all her senses to what bounced back. There. She could just feel it, a slight sour note. Padding through the scrawny trees, she followed it until she reached a long drop. Here the water seeped out from between the layers of rock. At various points it trickled, flowed, or rushed down the cliff face. Lower down, the moving waters merged into a single cascade that fell for many feet before joining the river at the valley floor. Aberrant peered down the waterfall. She didn't see anything obviously amiss with her eyes, so she trilled a series of notes, higher in pitch, then lower, and listened again. The water here felt right enough. It had deep tones of water that remembered the embrace of stone, mixed with the higher notes of droplets enjoying the caress of air as they fell. This was the close water. A hushed moment later, that same sour note reverberated back to her. Aha! It must be coming from the valley floor. Peering down, Aberrant squinted at what she could see of the stream further out. The tall trees of the lower slopes blocked most of the view. What she could see looked like the usual swelling of the stream in spring. She'd have to get closer. She pulled in her wings tight to her side and leapt off the edge. Diving straight down, her body paralleled the great waterfall. Not about to flounder another landing, she kept her eyes open, the wind and spray of the waterfall whipping around her as the tall trees of the valley floor rushed close. Watching for the right moment, she snapped out her wings and threw herself back to land at the water's edge with just a few back beats. Much better, she smiled. Cocking her head to the side, she listened. The sour note was louder here. She could hear it without even trying to listen. She'd never felt something so dissonant in the valley's waters before, and the ache of it made her teeth hurt. Her gut clenched, and she found herself gripping the rock on which she stood with taloned claws without intending to. Forcing herself to relax her grip on the stone, she took in a deep breath. I must find the source. Something this off could endanger the whole valley if it spreads. She stood still for a few moments. I need to move. Another few breaths. She realized she still wasn't moving. Bracing herself, she shook her body from head to tail tip, breaking the grip of the jarring notes. She was the guardian today, and she had to find an answer. She had to solve it. Releasing the rock, she stalked along the water's edge and examined its flow. In this part of the mountains, some ancient glacier had deposited enormous boulders on the lower slopes. They forced the water to flow between them, which over time had cut deep into the rock bed. In the late summer, when the land was dry, the sides would be striped with layers of stone. Today, the stream was brimming with the melt of spring. It seemed a bit more swollen than usual to Abrent, but nothing that the heavy rains of the last few weeks couldn't explain. Nothing so severe as to explain the dissonance that pounded at her senses. Peering around the next bend, she saw a great tree lodged between two boulders. Water from the swollen stream backed up behind it, pouring in a fairly thin sheet over its massive trunk at one end. Surely not, she edged closer. Surely this couldn't be the source of such discord. Trees fell and flowed down the river all the time. She cooed a soft trill to better hear the nearby threads. The discord was definitely louder here. She padded upstream a few paces and cooed again, hearing the way the melody of the river seemed to warp around the strange notes. The canyon was responding to the dissonance, but not the source of it. To be absolutely sure, she scampered to the fallen tree and bounded over one of the boulders that held it trapped in their embrace. Downstream of the lodged trunk, the water was shallower than she remembered it being in the past. With the stream forced through one section of the tree, the water now spread out across a scattering of smaller stones that had made their way down the mountain over the years. She could see fish swimming amongst the rocks, warmed by the proximity to sunlight. She trilled and cooed again. Reverberating back to her senses was a change in the land's melody that was akin to the water upstream, a sense of notes weaving around the discord. It was the sound of the land responding to change, but also different. Here the changes had a lilting quality to them, one that almost reminded her of something, but she couldn't quite place it. It gave her pause, though. The wrongness that felt so strong just a few paces back felt less like a poison to this water. Suspicions coiling inside her, she half hopped, half flew to a boulder just upstream of the small fallen tree and surveyed the scene with both her eyes and her magical senses. Looking upstream from this angle, she could see that a pool was forming at the bend in the stream, and the sound of the warping notes seemed to emanate from this place. She stepped closer. The narrow crevice in the mountain stone where the water flowed was limestone, Elladan's limestone, rock sides. She moved to where the stones overhung the growing pool. Leaning over the edge, she peered at the place where the water met stone. There, eddies and whirling vortices of water beat against the canyon walls as the rushing current was thwarted by the great tree. Given time, this tumult would eat away at the limestone. It was a softer stone, and it formed a great part of the mountain's base. She gulped, the knot tightening in her stomach. Even a change as small as this could create caverns, collapse stone, eventually reshape the mountains themselves. If the limestone was washed away, what would happen to Elladan? With a shudder, a memory came back to her unbidden. 3 springs back, there had been a mudslide on the far side of the valley. A whole section had dropped off in a single instant, wiping out a stand of old-growth ash trees. She recalled the anguished cries of the elemental whose locus had been those trees. They had been caught unawares and suddenly found themselves in a field of fresh, raw earth instead of a mighty stretch of ancient wood forest. Her mother had sent her away rather than let her watch whatever happened next, and the sounds of that elemental's cries had haunted her dreams for weeks. She shuddered and blinked back tears as more memories flooded her mind. Elodin's luminous face popping up over the edge of the nest when she was just beginning to see the stars. Her little claws trying to grasp the wisps of light that made up his corporeal form, only to laugh when they moved around her rather than be held, leaving her scales tingling with the deep magic of stone. The stories he told her, and the way they helped her feel at home in the valley, with the stone her foundation, and the mountains holding her in their embrace. He was more than just an elemental. He was family. Then the thought struck her, if the limestone eroded, the mountains too could fall. Her breath caught, the shock filling her at the idea, panic on its heels. Nerves searing white hot, she felt the rush of blood and fire in her temples, the discord, the wrongness, the change in the water's flow. It didn't just threaten her friend, it threatened the very core of the mountains, her home. I'll stop there. So we're hitting the end of time. And if you want to read the rest of the story, you can find it on my website at rachelsimpsonwrites.com and on most places where you can get ebooks. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. That was lovely. Absolutely lovely. All right. The last reader that we have is Daniel Waddle. And I don't know if he's going to be able to work his camera there. So.
Okay. Am I unmuted?
You are unmuted, Daniel. So
Okay.
you do not have a picture, but that is okay if you don't want to have a picture on.
No, I want a picture. I just don't know if I'm smart enough to make it happen.
Oh, yeah, it might be. Are you calling in from your phone or something?
No, I'm on a computer.
Oh, okay.
But I've never
used StreamYard before?
No, so I don't know exactly how to make it happen.
Okay. Well, that's fine. You don't have to. I mean, it'll be mostly audio for a lot of people that will listen anyway, so that will be okay. So, and you are going to read one or two stories, you said?
I have two.
Okay.
If you want to put up with them.
Yep. Yep.
Okay. Let me start. Let me kind of tell you what this is about. A friend of mine, who is actually my daughter's father-in-law, told me some stories, and we talked about them and asked if I would write some of them up. And so I did. And we've never published them. We had thought we might put together a whole book of them illustrated. And they deal with a character that calls himself the soul of Santa.
Okay.
So let me start with kind of a foreword that may give you some sense of it, and then to make some sense of what I'm reading. The varied names, St. Nicholas, Father Christmas, Papai Noel, Père Noel, Hotiocho, Old St. Nick, the Jolly Old Elf, Santa Claus. The countless myths, legends, and Christmas stories across cultures and centuries. The kindly sprite appearing differently in different times and places, behaving differently in different cultures, yet common across time and place, in essence, some combination of the human, the magical, and the divine, something that might be called the soul of Santa. These stories and illustrations seek that soul in a certain time and place, in a particular family and its experiences. A Black family in an American city somewhere in the Northeast in the 50s and 60s, a time when Black families were struggling to find a new place in American society. Those times and this family give context to these stories, but the tales are not, at least ultimately, about either. They are about something that transcends time and place and even this family. Hope in the midst of hopelessness, a quiet hero in whom everyday people can find their spirit and their power, and a choice for the days beyond a holiday that comes but once a year. The transcendent, however, finds its truest expression not in the grand world of lofty figures and unapproachable saints, but in the mundane lives of normal people with mundane struggles and joys and sorrows. So it is with this average family and its encounters with something, well, eternal. And so it is with these stories. They are composed, like our lives, of the mundane and the exalted, the secular and the sacred, the trifling and the sublime. The discerning reader may find in them reflections of everything from the Gospels to Charles Dickens to James Baldwin to Toy Dericotte to, yes, even Charles Schulz. The wise reader, however, may find in them a reflection of self in the world as it is, and perhaps a window into the soul of Santa. This was the first story, Tommy and the Soul of Santa. The window panes chattered in the wind, and sleet tapped against them, softly at times and then insistently as bitter gusts swept across the house. Tommy huddled down into his blankets and tried not to move so that he would not touch the cold parts of the sheets. The old rattling furnace could not quite keep up with the cold northeastern winters, even in his tiny room. It was Tommy's 9th Christmas Eve, the 6th that he could actually remember, and first in this room since he was a baby. He and his brothers and sisters normally shared rooms, but each year one got to have this room alone for an entire 12 months, and this was his year. Tommy would have liked to have been excited about the coming Christmas morning, but he just could not look forward to it. It would be a white Christmas, just like in the greeting cards, but Tommy knew this would be a colored Christmas, and worse, a Thursday Christmas. Those were the worst. They were nothing like the Sunday Christmases when his dad would come home from the road and the Friday paycheck would allow his parents to buy one of the leftover Christmas trees that the Goodwill sold for pennies on the dollar on Christmas Eve, along with used toys the white kids had tired of and given to their mothers to drop off for, quote, less fortunate, quote, children like Tommy. Sunday Christmases had dinners with meat instead of the rice and beans that always came at the end of the week when the paycheck had run out. No, this would be a Thursday Christmas, with Dad still out hauling his rig full of cargo from Ohio or Kansas or some other place Tommy had never been. Mama had already told the children that no extra money remained to buy a tree this year, and of course that meant no toys. Tommy was too old now to believe in some jolly Santa Claus with rosy white cheeks and a bright red suit and a bag full of toys. Tommy knew that Santa Claus was really Dad, and toys and trees came only on beginning of the week Christmases. And even on Monday and Tuesday Christmases, which usually had the little trees and a few toys, Dad could not be there, so they stopped feeling very Christmassy a long time ago. A gust of wind slapped at the window again, and Tommy huddled even further down into the blankets. A white Christmas. What a stupid thing to want. Why did Christmases have to be so white? A white Santa giving shiny new toys to white boys and girls in warm houses with roaring fires and beautiful trees sparkling with ornaments, while the colored kids waited for the leftovers, often getting not even those. Who cared about a colored Thursday Christmas? Tommy's throat suddenly ached and he let out a quiet sob, but he buried it in the pillow so his mother would not hear him and come to find out what was wrong. He was too old to be crying about the empty disappointment that had enveloped him. If his siblings found out, they would never let him forget it, especially his brothers. Po Tommy, they would say in those infuriating sing-song voices they always used when he was acting like a baby. They would laugh and ask him if he was going to cry again. His brothers were not mean, really, but to hear about his lying in bed crying in self-pity was something none of them could let pass. That was something only little crybaby boys did. Tommy pulled the covers over his head and stifled the ache until he finally fell asleep. The cold crept through the blankets and made his sleep restless. His dreams were restless too. The sleet continued to tap against the glass, sometimes moving him to that place of almost sleep, where he was not exactly awake, but not exactly asleep either. Soul, someone whispered, and Tommy's eyes opened. The wind was whisking across the glass, sounding at first like the voice he had just heard, then changing into a whistle before dying back down. Tommy closed his eyes and slipped back into his troubled dreams. Soul, came the whisper again, and Tommy sat up, holding the blankets and the old bedspread tightly against his chin. He surveyed the room, but he was still alone in the cold darkness. He stared at the door until he could make it out, but it was shut. It was not one of his brothers playing with him. Besides, they would never try to scare him at night. He flopped back into his pillow. Stupid dream, he thought. This time it took longer to fall asleep, but he finally made it. Soul, someone said, and Tommy's eyes flew open. Sleet was still slapping against the windows, and the wind still rushed over the house, but the room was different now. It was warm, and a soft yellow light played on the wall and on the glass, and a crackling sound came from somewhere. Tommy sat up again, slowly this time. He was still in his room, but the room was bigger. So big, in fact, that beyond the end of his bed was a fireplace with bright red coals below logs that were popping and snapping amidst golden, softly twisting flames. He could smell the wood smoke, and another smoky scent was in the air, a sweet kind of cherry smell, as if someone were baking a pie in an old wood stove. He was dreaming, of course, but it was one of those dreams where you knew you were dreaming, and despite your best try, you could not wake up, and everything seemed as real as if it were actually happening. Something to the right of the fireplace moved, and Tommy realized a figure was sitting in a rocking chair, lighting a long pipe with a match. The figure tossed the match into the fireplace and leaned back in the chair. Like any smart boy, he should have called out loudly for his mother, but he could somehow sense that the person in the chair was no threat. In fact, Tommy wondered for a moment if the figure was actually Dad, or maybe funny Uncle Arnie, who always made Tommy laugh and liked to wink at him during family gatherings, as if he and Tommy were sharing a secret joke no one else would understand. The figure's skin was the same color as Dad's and Uncle Arnie's. In fact, it was exactly the same color as Tommy's. He could not be either Dad or Uncle Arnie, however, because neither of them had a beard, and this man had a short, neatly trimmed white whiskers covering his face. They ran up the sides of his face to close-cropped curls of the same color. He wore a dapper three-piece suit of dark red, and on his head was a burgundy derby, cocked in a rakish angle and decorated with a deep green twig of holly in the band. Tommy knew this was not going to be a scary dream, so he nonchalantly asked, "Who are you?" "I'm the soul of Santa," said the man, and he took a long, slow draw on his pipe and let the smoke waft out of his mouth in a swirling cloud that filled the room with the cherry pie smell again. Tommy was immediately skeptical. Sure, the man was wearing a red suit and a piece of holly, but it was not the bright red snowsuit Tommy had seen in so many pictures. It was the style of suit men at his church wore on Sunday mornings, and it had no fur and no shiny wide black belt, and in place of the big boots were plain old high-top shoes you might find on any of the Negroes that hung out at Jack's barbershop down on 12th Street. "You ain't no Santa Claus," Tommy said. The man lowered his head, but kept his eyes on Tommy, as if peering over imaginary spectacles. "You ain't no Santa Claus?" he said. "What?" Tommy asked, a little startled. You ain't no Santa Claus? Is that how your mother would have you speak? He was right, of course. Tommy had used the lingo he used with his friends, but was never allowed to use at home or at school. White people, his mother often reminded him, people with power, liked to think black people were stupid and uneducated. Speaking low rent, as she put it, played into those ugly notions. Her children were not going to help such people think they were right. You are not Santa Claus, Tommy said, a little defiance in his tone. You don't look anything like him. That was an exaggeration. He did look a little like him, if Santa Claus were black. Of course I look like him. I am the soul of Santa. How else would I look? I have to look like myself. That one stumped Tommy a little. If he really was the soul of Santa, no one could look more like the real Santa than the real Santa. Still, Tommy, I know what you mean, said the soul of Santa. You mean I don't look like those department store Santas? Well, they aren't me, and I'm not them. I'm real. I ain't getting it. Here came the over-the-spectacles look again. I don't understand what you were telling me, Tommy said. The soul of Santa leaned his head back on the chair again and sipped on the long pipe stem, this time peering at Tommy from under the imaginary spectacles. Tommy found these looks a little unsettling. The little clouds of smoke did not help at all. In fact, he was pretty sure Mama would not be too happy about all this smoking in the house. The soul of Santa did not seem very concerned about that, however. When a person sees me, really sees me, I appear however he wants, no, however he needs me to appear. When a Japanese boy sees me, I look a lot like his father with a long, straight beard and what you would call yellow skin. In Mexico, my complexion is usually a much lighter brown, and sometimes they even wear a sombrero. Okay, not very often, but sometimes. Even white boys and girls who see me seldom see a department store Santa. As I said, I am real. Tommy pondered all of this for a couple of minutes. It actually made sense somehow, but he was still not sure exactly how. Even so, his skepticism slipped away, so he asked his next question with more sincerity. Why is it, then, that no one ever draws you the way they see you? Why do they always make you look like the department store Santa? Well, those are adults who have never actually seen me, or if they have, their bosses won't let them draw me as I am because they think those pictures would never sell. The soul of Santa rocked back and blew out some more cherry pie smoke, and then he chuckled a little as reflection from the fire danced a little in his eyes. So, said the soul of Santa, what do you want for Christmas this year? Tommy's throat caught again, just as it had earlier when he first went to bed. This time, however, he was not thinking about Christmas trees or toys or even missing his dad. He was thinking about how hard it must be for his dad to be out on the road, away from Mama and his children on Christmas. He was thinking about his Mama and how lonely she must feel on Christmas Eve when Dad was gone. He was thinking about his brothers and sisters and how they must miss Dad just as much as Tommy, and how they might also lie in their beds and cry silently into the pillows. That's all right, said the soul of Santa. I think I know what you want for Christmas. Tommy let the tears slip out and said miserably, but I can't have that. Dad has to work, and he can't come home in the middle of the week. The trucking company isn't going to let him do that. The soul of Santa's eyes misted over too, and he said, you're right about that, Tommy. He gazed softly at Tommy for a while and said, so what can you do about that? The ache in Tommy's throat got worse, and he blurted out in a hurt voice, nothing. I can't do nothing about it. The soul of Santa did not look over the imaginary spectacles this time. Instead, he asked gently, "Nothing? Are you sure about that?" Tommy let that sink in. The soul of Santa watched the logs spark and crackle. He took long, slow draws on his pipe and let the smoke swirl above him. He seemed to relish the warm light that bathed the room. Then the pain in Tommy's throat suddenly dissolved. He no longer felt empty or disappointed or sad. It was as clear as if he had known all along. He knew what he could do about it. I could let Mama know that I see how lonely she must be. I could tell her I will be with her on Christmas to make it feel as though Dad isn't so far away. The soul of Santa smiled and said, "I like that one. That's a good one." He kept watching the fire and rocking slowly back and forth in the creaking wooden chair. Cherry pie smell mingled with the wood smoke and made the room feel warmer and safer. I could help my brothers and sisters remember that Dad's not here because he's working hard to take care of us, even though he really wants to be here. Maybe make them feel as if Dad's right here with us. "Well, that's a good one too," said the soul of Santa. Finally, Tommy said, "And when Dad gets home, I could make him feel like it's Christmas, even if Christmas is already over." Tommy liked that one. He realized that when Dad came home, it did feel a little more like Christmas. The soul of Santa stopped rocking and leaned back in the chair. Something between a chuckle and a laugh slipped out of him, and he took another long draw and then turned to Tommy and gazed at him through the swirls, studying him. "You know, Thomas Hughes Clayton," he finally said, "I believe you have soul." Tommy's middle name meant soul, and he wondered for a moment if he was being teased. But it didn't feel like teasing. It felt good and right. Then the soul of Santa said, "I think you had better get to sleep. It'll be Christmas morning before you know it." Tommy immediately felt as though he could no longer sit up, and he lay slowly back onto his pillow. A pleasant dreaminess came over him, and just outside the dream, he felt someone tuck the covers up tight around his shoulders, and he heard a quiet whisper say, "Merry Christmas, little soul." A few hours later, a loud thud jolted Tommy awake, and his elbow and knee hurt, and he felt the cold of the floor through his pajamas. He looked up at the high bed, which was not really very high, but when you're 9 years old, every bed seems high, especially when you've just fallen out of it. He sat up and pulled the bedspread off the bed and wrapped it around himself. The little room looked just as it had when he first went to bed, except now it was flooded by a bright gray light. It was still cold, but the cold did not seem as bad. The wind still slipped past the windows, but the sleet had changed to huge feathers of snow that nearly obscured the big tree as they came down. There was no fireplace and no rocking chair and no soul of Santa. But there was still a whisper. He could not hear it yet, but he could feel it curling up from deep inside like the smoke from that old pipe. Finally, it slipped past his lips, and he heard himself say, "Santa." There was no response, and he whispered again, "Santa." Again, no one responded, but he realized that he did not need a response. And that is when Tommy whispered, almost silently, "Santa, it's Christmas." That's the first story.
Very good. Very good. Do you want
The
to read
second,
the next
go ahead.
one? Yeah.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say you're going to go ahead and read the next one.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is the same family, same night actually. It's called Soul of Santa and the Shoes. It is hard to believe that it happened some 60 years ago and is still so vivid in my memory. Every Christmas, almost as if I am reliving it, the whole scene replays in my mind, but each year it means something a little different, a little deeper. Even so, I've never told anyone about it until now. I couldn't have been more than 4 or 5 years old. I was in my bed with the covers tucked all around me the way my mother had left me before kissing me goodnight and wishing me Merry Christmas, little girl. She always called me little girl when she was feeling especially affectionate. I had secretly put on my white blouse and red and black plaid shirt and sneaked into bed without anyone seeing. I wanted to be completely ready for Christmas morning and the present I had been talking about for weeks. I kept the covers up around my chin so Mama would not discover that I was not in my pajamas. I snuggled down into the covers and tried hard to go to sleep so Santa Claus would come soon. Snuggling down felt good because the room was Christmas Eve cold, wind and sleet snapping against the window. Still, it was not going to be easy to fall asleep. For one thing, 2 of my older sisters were sleeping in the larger bed in our room, and they would not stop whispering and giggling. Most nights I would have crept over to their bed and tried to join in the giggling, but not with Santa on his way, and not in my dress. The other thing that kept me awake was the thrilling anticipation for Christmas morning. Santa was going to bring me a shiny new pair of red patent leather shoes I had seen in a store window downtown. I was so excited about those shoes I could hardly contain myself. I imagined walking into Sunday school in my red plaid skirt, my red sweater, and those beautiful red shoes. How fun that would be. I was just beginning to become aware of the pleasure of feeling pretty. I closed my eyes as tightly as I could and covered my ears to block out my sisters. Those shoes, however, were not going away. They practically danced in my head. Earlier in the evening, my family had been gathered in the living room, as we always did on Christmas Eve. The older ones mostly watched the younger ones chattering about the gifts they hoped would be there in the morning. It was one of those Christmases without a tree, but I was certain Santa wouldn't mind about that. Mama said Daddy was on the road and would not be able to get a tree, but he would be home in a couple of days and it would be like having a tree. I didn't really understand what she meant, but I was okay with it. The living room was warm with everyone in it. There was not enough furniture for all of us, so the youngest sat on the hooked rug, and the older ones got the sofa and one of the chairs, while Mama sat in the other, smiling and laughing at our giddiness and silly conversations. Bobby, he wanted to be called Robert because he was 16, and he was now, quote, too old for baby names like Bobby, perched regally in the chair across from Mama, his leg crossed over his knee the way Daddy crossed his. My brother Tommy was unusually quiet. He was 8 or 9 years old, I'm not really certain now, and usually blabbered more than anyone, but not tonight. He looked something between angry and sad, and he gave only one-word answers when the others tried to cajole him into joining the fun. He was sitting against the wall with his knees pulled up and his arms around his knees. Mama finally asked him, What got you so down, boy? It's Christmas Eve. Tommy just muttered, It's a Thursday Christmas. Ain't nothing special about no Thursday Christmas. Might as well just skip it and go to Friday. Ain't even no tree. I could see tears in his eyes, but he rubbed them so nothing would spill out and scowled at the floor. Mama's smile slipped and her eyes filled a little too, but before she could say anything, Bobby swept me off the floor into his lap and said in his best daddy voice, Hey, baby girl, what you want for Christmas? A big doll? Then he tickled me so that I squealed and jumped around in his lap. Or maybe you want a baseball bat and a glove. That it? Or a football? I let out a giggling no. And he hugged me tightly and laughed and said, "A football. Santa's going to bring you a big fat football so you can play with all the boys." I pushed away so I could see his face and said, I'm going to get brand new red shiny shoes. "Shiny red shoes," he cried out. "How are you going to play football in shiny red shoes? They don't put up with shiny red shoes in football. Besides, you got to share them with me. How am I supposed to get your little shoes on my feet?" He grabbed one of my stocking feet and pushed it up against the sole of his big sneaker. I slapped his chest and giggled again. "You don't get to wear my red shoes, and I'm not playing any football either. They'll only be for church or maybe sometimes for a special day at school. They're too pretty for playing outside. You want my shoes? Why don't you paint your dumb old sneakers red?" That made everyone laugh, and Bobby let out a fake scream and hugged me tight again. Even Tommy sort of laughed, but he didn't want anyone to see it. The others resumed their chattering and trying to speak over each other. Mama was smiling again, but young as I was, I could tell it was not a real smile, and her eyes were still moist. She stood up and went into the kitchen. "How would you like some hot cocoa?" she called out cheerfully, and we all yelled, "Yes." Bobby caught Tommy's eye and shook his head slightly, the way Daddy would do when he saw us fooling, and we had better stop fooling, and I mean right now. Tommy just looked down and put his forehead on his arm so no one could see his eyes. I lay back against Bobby's chest and took in the room. Little figurines of Mary and Joseph and baby Jesus in the crib sat on top of the old piano. Some of the ornaments that would have been on the tree if we'd had one were scattered around on the piano top as well. And a few of them were placed in little arrangements on an end table and on the dining room table. My sisters and I had made little paper stars and Christmas wreaths and lined them with glue and glitter, and they were hanging from strings tacked to the top of the doorway into the kitchen. Mom and Bobby had to duck so as not to hit them, and when they didn't duck, it was fun to watch them blow the paper ornaments out of their faces as they came through the doorway. In the front window was a wreath made of stiff, crinkly red cellophane, ringing an electric candle with a red Christmas tree bulb. When it was plugged in, it made the whole window glimmer red. I loved it when Mama turned off all the lights and we sat among the walls covered by the wreath's gentle glow. She always did that on Christmas Eve, just before we were all to go to bed. Then we would quiet down and let the crimson room soothe us into peaceful contemplation. Mama came back in with a tray full of cups of hot chocolate, and each of us took one and settled down. Mama turned off the lights, and the only sound was everyone sipping. The smell and taste of the chocolate made the crimson room seem like the best place on earth. In the middle of the night, I woke up with the covers tucked around my chin. My sisters had stopped their whispering and were deep in their dreams. In the air was the strangest smell. It reminded me of cherry pie. I wondered if Mama were up baking, but that made no sense. It was very late, and even if Mama were baking for Christmas morning, she would have been making a sweet potato pie. That was always the Christmas pie. No, this was something else. It had the strangest feel to it, as if it were a magical smell. I slid out of bed as quietly as I could so as not to wake my sisters. I don't know to this day why I didn't wake them up to ask about the strange, almost smoky smell. Instead, I turned the door handle as gingerly as I knew how and peeked down the hallway. The house was completely dark except for a yellow shaft of light emanating from under Tommy's bedroom door. I crept to the door and listened for sound, but heard nothing. I opened the door slowly and peered into his room. I had to put my hand over my mouth to keep from squealing into light. It was Santa. He was sitting in a rocking chair, taking slow draws on a pipe in front of a beautiful fireplace that lit up the room. I knew immediately who it was, even though he did not look like Santa as I'd always seen in pictures and in the department stores. He was dressed in a burgundy suit with a vest, and he had dark red derby on his head. But I knew it was him. It never occurred to me that it could be anyone else. You must be thinking, how could I have seen a stranger sitting in front of a fireplace where Bobby's bedroom wall should have been and not thought I was dreaming? But nothing about it felt like a dream, and nothing about it seemed odd. It felt and looked as natural as if that fireplace had always been there. The cherry pie smell coming from Santa's pipes surrounded me, and I could not help myself. I pushed the door wider and ran to Santa, throwing my arms around his big chest and pressing my cheek into the softness of his vest. He chuckled and put his arms around me and said, "Shh, little girl. We don't want to wake up the whole house." Then he stroked my head and pulled me close. "I'm so glad you came to sit with me tonight," he whispered. "I'd hoped you would." Then he pulled me into his lap, just as Bobby had done, and held me for a long time. I didn't say anything. I just lay my head under his grizzly chin and felt safe and warm and loved while he rocked the chair gently. After a while, I sat up and looked into his eyes, but what I found completely surprised me. Tears were rolling down his cheeks into his beard, and he looked profoundly heartbroken. "What's wrong, Santa? Why are you so sad?" I wanted to hug him again more tightly than ever. His wet cheeks tore at something in my chest, and I thought I might begin to cry as well. "Oh, little one, it's nothing. It's nothing you need worry about. I'm just a little sad in my soul, that's all. Everyone gets a little sad sometimes." "No, Santa, tell me. Why is your soul so sad?" I begged. "I can't stand to see you feel so bad." "I'm not sad about me, little girl," he said. "I'm just sad that my bag is empty, and I can't give you the red shoes you wanted. I wanted so badly to give them to you for Christmas, and it breaks my heart to disappoint you." Hearing that I would not get my new shoes was truly disappointing, and normally I would have burst into tears. But Santa's tear-stained cheeks were so much worse. I reached up and wiped the tears away. "Oh, Santa," I said, my voice cracking a little, "I don't need no red shoes." I slid off his lap and said, "Will you stay here for a minute? I'll be right back if you can wait just a minute." "Of course I'll wait," he said, and stroked my head again. I tiptoed down the hall as fast as I could and went into our bedroom closet. In the dark, it was hard to find what I wanted, but I finally found my black Sunday shoes and slid them on, working hard to fasten the thin straps. I had only just learned to fasten them by myself, and the near blackness made it take longer than I would have liked, but eventually I succeeded. Tiptoeing quietly was much more difficult in my shoes, but the warm light from Tommy's room was still flickering against the hallway wall, and Santa was still in his rocking chair. I climbed into his lap and held my feet out. "I already have beautiful black shoes. Daddy brought them for me last Easter. Look how shiny they are. They even match the black in my skirt, and everyone says I'm the prettiest girl ever when I wear them. I don't need no red shoes. You've already given me my shoes. I got my Christmas shoes on Easter, Santa. I got them early." I dropped my feet and hugged him as tightly as I could. "I'm going to wear them all day tomorrow, just like it was Sunday. And I'll be the prettiest girl in the house, even prettier than my sisters, and they're really pretty." Santa's belly began to jiggle, and I could hear him laugh ever so quietly. His arms tightened around me. "My bag may be empty," he whispered, "but my heart is full. You've made my heart full, little girl." I nuzzled into his vest and closed my eyes. I could hear his full heart beating softly into the vest. The peaceful feeling returned, and soon I was asleep. When I awoke, I was back in my bed, still in my blouse and my skirt, and my shiny black shoes. I slid into the gray morning light of the cold room, careful not to step too hard on the floor so I would not wake my sisters. I tiptoed again down the hallway. Tommy's door was closed and no one else was up, so I kept going till I was in the living room. Snow covered the ground outside, and more was coming down. On the floor, on top of a brand new shoebox, was a pair of shiny red patent leather shoes. Years later, Mama told me that Bobby had worked after school and on Saturdays shining shoes at Jack's barber shop, saving all his tips so he could buy me those red shoes. My brother Joey and my sisters spent their Saturdays rustling up soda bottles around the neighborhood and turning them in for the penny deposit. Even Tommy had helped out. When they had enough money, Bobby went to the department store downtown and bought the shoes so they would be there for me when I woke up. I still have those shoes. I keep them on a shelf in my closet in the same shoebox they sat on that sweet Christmas morning so many years ago. Every time I see them, I take them out every Christmas Eve and marvel at them. My heart is full, just as Santa's was. But it was never really about the shoes. Those are the first two chapters.
Very nice. Thank you.
Yeah.
So you are our last one, Daniel.
Okay.
You closed it out with the spirit of Christmas.
There you go. That's why I picked those.
Very good. Very good. So just so you know, Daniel, I don't know if you caught everything, Daniel, but this will be up on YouTube, so you'll be able to watch it. So I'll send out a link to the Morehead Friends writing group because Robert read earlier as well. So
that sounds great.
All right. Sounds good. Wonderful.
Well, thanks for letting me play.
Yeah, you're welcome. Glad you could join us. So, do you want to do it again next year, Amanda? Maybe. All right.
Yeah, I thought this was great. There's a lot of really different stories and twists and all sorts of stuff. I thought it was really fun.
Yeah,
Thank
different voices, different voices. That's what I find most fascinating. So you have a very nice voice too, Daniel. So very good for reading. So yeah. All right. Well, that's it for those of us that stuck. Everyone who stuck around. Yólabókaflód, and you can go off and read your own stories well into the night if you'd like. So it's almost midnight for Daniel and I, and then it's 10 o'clock for you?
Yeah, it's past my bedtime, I think. You can hear it. I get up like 5:30 in the morning. So
yeah, right.
Yeah. Well,
all right.
Well, sorry, I couldn't figure out how to make the camera work. But
no, that's okay. Nuni was having issues earlier. So yeah, when you're dealing with new technology you've not had to use, it's a little different. So
I noticed it wanted to pick it up on my phone camera. It was really interesting. So I had to play around with the settings, but we can always do a dry run if we do this again and have folks come on early and kind of do like, hey, can you do a camera check?
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah.
All right.
Well, thank you guys for listening to me, and thanks for and it was fun to hear what I got to hear. This is our night for family Christmas. We had all our kids over.
Oh, wonderful.
So I couldn't come in until late, but
nope, totally fine. Worked out well. All right. I will see you all.
Good night, everybody. Happy holidays.
Good. Happy holidays.
You
Bye.
Bye.